Chapter 1081. On the 6th of May, year 3782, a piece of news blew up all of Signs. The Kanla Empire announced that New Flyer had been involved in various illegal activities within the Kanla Empire, and had even secretly supported a rebellion against the Kanla Empire's royal family. As a result, New Flyer was listed as an illegal trading company and was banned from the Kanla Empire. At the same time, in order to investigate New Flyer's crimes and ensure the safety of the Kanla Empire, the Kanla Empire declared that New Flyer was an enemy and cut off all cooperation with New Flyer. They also made an official statement to the Principality of Constantine, requesting the Principality of Constantine to ban New Flyer's activities within the Principality of Constantine. At the end of this statement, the Kanla Empire made it very clear that if the Principality of Constantine did not comply with the Kanla Empire's request, then the Kanla Empire would directly take action against New Flyer. When this statement was released, all of Signs was shocked. New Flyer was currently the trading company that was in the limelight in Signs. They possessed magic machine technology that countless countries and organizations coveted, as well as powerful military magic machines that many countries feared. They had become the most powerful trading company in Signs. The Kanla Empire was one of the two empires in Signs, and could even be said to be the most powerful country on the continent. The two had clearly been working well together before, so why did they suddenly turn against each other? Some people immediately thought of the bloody conflict at the Namso mine in the northwest of the Drow Kingdom. At the time, the Kanla Empire's insistence on getting involved in this matter had already made many people puzzled. Now that the Kandra Empire had declared war on the Frestek Chamber of Commerce, many people couldn't help guessing that it was because of the bloody conflict in Namukuo that there was an irreconcilable conflict between the two sides that made the Kandra Empire and the Frestek Chamber of Commerce fall out. However, this gave rise to even more doubts and suspicions. The Frestek Chamber of Commerce wasn't a normal company. Because they controlled the military magic machines that were important to all countries, not only did the Frestek Chamber of Commerce have scruples with all the countries on the continent, almost all the countries wanted to have a good relationship with them to obtain the military magic machine technology. If they became enemies with New Flyer, wouldn't that be cutting off their hopes of obtaining military magic machine technology from New Flyer? Everyone was clear that since the Frestek Chamber of Commerce invented the military magic machines, the key to winning or losing the war was who had more and better military magic machines. Kanla Empire and New Flyer had turned against each other. Not to mention whether or not they had the ability to eliminate the evil reactionary organization New Flyer. Just the fact that New Flyer had turned to support the Mala Empire was something that the Kanla Empire couldn't accept. However, the next day, May 7th, the Mala Empire suddenly issued a statement to the public, stating that because New Flyer had participated in various rebellious activities within the Mala Empire, New Flyer was listed as an illegal trading company and was banned within the Mala Empire. Apart from a few differences in wording, the contents of the statement were almost exactly the same as the statement released by the Kanla Empire the day before. When everyone saw this statement, they were shocked, but at the same time, they also came up with a guess. The Kanla Empire and the Mala Empire had probably discussed this in secret, right? That's why they turned against New Flyer together. However, this also explained the strange behavior of the Kanla Empire previously. If it wasn't for the Mala Empire reaching an agreement in private, the Kanla Empire certainly wouldn't take such a huge risk to turn against New Flyer and even declare war on New Flyer. Otherwise, if New Flyer turned to support the Mala Empire, then the Kanla Empire would be doomed. However, why would the Mala Empire agree to deal with New Flyer together with the Kanla Empire? With such a good opportunity, why wouldn't the Mala Empire take advantage of the Shinfei merchants and obtain the support of New Flyer to deal with the Kanla Empire in one fell swoop? Without the Kanla Empire as their biggest enemy, the Mala Empire had the power to unify the entire continent. After the Mala Empire's statement, in the next few days, There were a total of 47 signs countries including the Drow Kingdom, the Marlow Magic Kingdom, the Sac Kingdom, and the Fawk Kingdom. There were also 63 large and small organizations including the Continental Sorcerers Guild, the Chino Union, the Valley Organization Committee, and the Continental Blacksmiths Union that announced that New Flyer had committed all kinds of crimes, so they decided to break off relations with New Flyer and treat New Flyer as an enemy. In just a week, the New Flyer that was popular all over the signs like it was the most welcomed everywhere had become a rat that everyone wanted to beat up. The New Flyer's branches and factories in the various countries had all suffered different degrees of damage, and even fell into the control of other countries and organizations. It could be said that in just a short period of time, the New Flyer had suffered an unimaginable loss. It was like countless hands and feet had been cut off in an instant. In the eyes of countless people, no matter how strong the New Flyer was, no matter how powerful their military magic machines were, in front of so many countries and organizations that gathered all the resources of the signs, there was no chance of luck. This company that had been established for 23 years, bringing the magic machine industry to the continent and changing the lives of many people on the continent, being known as the fastest developing company in the history of the signs with the most prospects, was about to become history. Do you all think the same? Su Yi's eyes swept over the high-level members of the New Flyer in the conference room. He had a smile on his face and his expression was very relaxed. You all think that our company is finished this time? That there's no hope? Bah! The president of the Shinfei Household Magical Machinery Chamber of Commerce, Ankato, spat fiercely. You want to finish our company with just these people? Dream on. That's right. These idiots don't even know what kind of power our company has. Do they think that they can scare us? What a joke. The president of the Shinfei Mining Chamber of Commerce, the dwarf Lee Sop, also had a disdainful expression. President, why don't you just give the order and tell us how to kill these bastards? The captain of the New Flyer's guards, Hart, slapped his chest and loudly said, Our brothers in the guards have been itching for a long time. Now that so many idiots are willing to rush to their deaths, we can't be happier. That's right. So what if they have more people? In front of our company's guards, they are still a bunch of trash. Su Yi revealed a faint smile and raised his hand to cut off everyone's excitement. Seeing that everyone is so confident, I'm relieved. However, I have to remind everyone that this time, our company can be said to be the enemy of the entire world. Is it really good for you all to be so confident? So what if we are the enemy of the entire world? These guys clearly wanted to devour us long ago, but they didn't have the guts. Now that they have finally gathered together, they feel that they have the ability to devour us. That's why they dare to make a move. If they were really that strong, would they need to act like this? Ankato curled his lips and said disdainfully. That's right. Su Yi said with a nod with a faint smile. These guys are indeed far from being as strong as they seem. Or to be more precise, we are far more powerful than they think. Thus, even if we are the enemy of the entire world, it isn't that scary. Of course, there is an old saying that goes, strategically, you have to look down on the enemy. Tactically, you have to pay attention to the enemy. Seabass. New Flyer's finance director Seabass, who was already 67 years old this year, was still full of energy. He stood up and gracefully bowed to Su Yi before saying with a smile, Sir Chairman, what are your orders? I announce that the company will enter a state of combat readiness. All logistical resources will be guaranteed according to wartime standard. Do you understand what I mean? I will follow your instructions. Seabass bowed slightly. Very good. Kanbai. The dwarf Kanbai jumped up and stood on his chair. He forcefully knocked on his chest, making a thudding sound. Sir Chairman, please give your orders. Even if you want us dwarves to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a sea of flames, there won't be any problems. Su Yi smiled. If the dwarves of your magic R&D center were to be sent to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a sea of flames, then our new flyer would really be finished. Alright, the task I'm giving you is to adjust the production capacity from now on and speed up the production of military magic machines. As for how to ensure the production of some basic magic machines for civilian use, you can discuss it with Grius. Yes, Kanbai replied loudly. His eyes glowed as he rubbed his hands vigorously. With an excited expression, he asked, Sir Chairman, are we going to go all out this time? Sui shrugged his shoulders, of course. Do you think those guys are here to drink and chat? After a pause, Suyi's gaze fell on the captain of New Flyer's guard squad, Hart. Hart immediately stood up and straightened his body, looking straight at Sui. I await your orders, Sir Chairman. Sui nodded and left the table. He came to the large map hanging on the wall and slapped it, saying in a deep voice, If nothing unexpected happens, the enemy will launch an attack in a short period of time. Hart, I hope you can give them a painful blow right from the start. Can you do it? The corners of Hart's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a smile. He snorted and said, Sir Chairman, I'll definitely give those guys an unforgettable lesson. Very good. Sui nodded heavily. He turned his head and swept his gaze across everyone in the conference room. Everyone, from now on, New Flyer will enter the most crucial period, and also the most dangerous period. Do you have the confidence to hold on with me? Yes. Of course. Sir Chairman, we'll always listen to your orders. Kill those bastards. Furious shouts immediately erupted in the conference room. Sui couldn't help but laugh. These people in front of him were his old subordinates who had followed him for 10 or even 20 years. In this dangerous moment, not a single one of them showed the slightest hint of fear. This made him feel extremely gratified. Sui slapped the map again with a backhand. Everyone, from now on, let us wage war against this world. Chapter 1082. Count Antasur rode on his favorite pure white warhorse, Pineapple, and quickly climbed up a small hill. He raised his head slightly and looked at the sparse crowd on the plains in the distance. The corners of his mouth curled up, and his expression was full of disdain. These guys are the Kingdom of Ruor's army? Look at them, they don't even have 5,000 men. Where did they get the courage to stop me? Lord Count, don't underestimate them. Look, the Kingdom of Ruor's army is equipped with many military magic machines. They have even more than our army. We have to be more careful. Military magic machines. Count Antasur snorted. You guys talk about it all the time as if you can't fight without it. In my opinion, there's nothing great about it. With just these few people, my elite heavy cavalry will be able to finish them off with a single charge. Lord Count, I think it's better to be careful. What if? There's no what if. Count Antasur waved his hand impatiently, interrupting the advice of his loyal adjutant. Pass down the order, the heavy cavalry is to prepare for a charge. We have to teach these bastards who dare to rebel against the Kanla Empire a lesson in blood. The adjutant looked at the scattered formation of the Kingdom of Ruor's army. No matter how he looked at it, there were only a few thousand men. There wasn't even a single warhorse among them. He couldn't help but shake his head. Even if the enemy had the so-called military magic machines, they shouldn't be a problem. He stopped persuading Count Antasur and passed down his orders. Count Antasur was leading one of the top 10 elite armies of the Kanla Empire, the Glory Army. Their mission was to be the vanguard and be the first to attack the Kingdom of Ruor. Half a month ago, because the Principality of Constantine refused the Kanla Empire's request to ban the New Flyer, the Kanla Empire used this as an excuse to declare war on the Principality of Constantine. Then, because the Kingdom of Ruor refused the Kanla Empire's request to pass through, the Kanla Empire declared war on the Kingdom of Ruor. Count Antasur's Glory Army was the first army of the Kanla Empire to enter the Kingdom of Ruor. It was the vanguard army. It wasn't easy for me to get this vanguard position. On this battlefield, it is time for me, Romanus Antisur, to shine. Seeing that the heavy cavalry was in formation and ready, Count Antisur raised the sword in his hand. Charge! Glory illuminates my heart. 3,000 heavily armed cavalrymen roared in unison. Even their war horses were covered in a thick layer of armor. The 3,000 war horses raised their front hooves and charged forward. Just the cavalrymen and war horses weighed more than a ton. With the heavy armor and weapons on their bodies, their weight could easily approach a shocking 2 tons. When a cavalryman like this charged forward, the momentum was already shocking enough. Now that 3,000 cavalrymen were charging at the same time, the momentum was naturally incomparably shocking. The ground trembled from the galloping of the war horses. The muffled sound of iron hooves stomping on the ground mixed together, and it was like thunder that resounded through the entire sky. Count Antisur laughed maniacally as he watched his cavalrymen charge towards the kingdom of Ruhr's formation. Ah, what a beautiful formation, what a beautiful voice! A small kingdom of Ruhr actually dares to be so arrogant and make an enemy out of our great Candla Empire. Today is the day you'll be buried. Whoosh! A strange sound was suddenly heard, as if something had broken through the air at high speed. Count Antisur looked in the direction of the sound in shock. He saw a fiery red light fly out from the kingdom of Ruhr's formation and head straight towards them. Humph! Just some cheap toys. Before Count Antisur could finish his sentence, the fiery red light had already landed in the midst of the charging cavalrymen. Boom! An abnormally bright flame suddenly exploded, followed by an incomparably loud explosion. Countless cavalrymen in heavy armor and their war horses were sent flying amidst the flames and explosions. Even some severed limbs were sent flying into the sky. With just this one attack, a huge gap was forcibly opened up in the originally complete and tight formation of the heavy cavalry. But this was not the end. Immediately after the fiery red light, more than 10 lights flew out from the kingdom of Ruhr's formation and landed in the middle of the cavalrymen's formation. Boom, 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 boom. A series of intense flames exploded, followed by a series of explosions. Countless cavalrymen and war horses were blown away, and countless severed limbs flew in the air. In the blink of an eye, the 3,000 heavy-armored cavalrymen that had looked so majestic and unstoppable just a moment ago were now completely unrecognizable. Only less than 1,000 heavy-armored cavalrymen survived, but they could no longer maintain the momentum of their charge, let alone maintain a complete formation. Count Antisur's eyes widened as he looked at the scattered cavalrymen in the distance. He could not believe what he was seeing. Oh my God! This was a full 3,000 cavalrymen. This was the pride of the Glory Legion, the most elite army of the Candla Empire that no one could stop even in a direct battle with the Mala Empire. But now they hadn't even touched the enemy's side, and they had lost more than half of their forces. This is impossible. This is impossible. Endless shock and deep fear filled Count Antisur's heart, and he couldn't help roaring out in rage. How could these kingdom of Ruhr waste be this strong? This must be an illusion. The adjutant on the side swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty. He looked away from the tragic battlefield in front of him and anxiously shouted at Count Antisur, "Sir Count, let's quickly retreat. They even have the magic cannons, we can't match them at all." Retreat? Count Antisur turned to look at the adjutant. Retreat where? We are the vanguard. Do you know what vanguard means? But Sir Count, we definitely aren't their match. If we don't retreat, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. Count Antisur coldly looked at him and shook his head. Impossible. Since I've taken the vanguard, there is no possibility of retreating. Send my orders, the entire army will attack. Sir Count Antisur, you can't do this. The adjutant was shocked as he loudly shouted, "Even the heavy cavalry was destroyed, how could we beat them? You should listen to me and retreat." When we go back, ask the army headquarters to give us more military magic machines. There will be no problem then. Count Antisur looked back and found that the Kingdom of Ruhr's army was already moving. Although they didn't have battle horses, when they got on those strange-looking armored magic vehicles, they moved very quickly. In the blink of an eye, they had already caught up to the heavy cavalry that were running back. Then the armored magic vehicles spat out tongues of flame, and the heavy cavalry that were covered in heavy armor fell down like straw being harvested, not being able to resist at all. Count Antisur took a deep breath. On this expedition, he had relied on the power of his family to take the vanguard position. He hoped that he could earn some military merits and pave the way for his future promotion. However, now that he had seen the terrifying might of the Kingdom of Ruhr's military magic machines, he couldn't help being shaken. Seeing the flame-red light fall and a group of heavy cavalry being sent flying, Count Antisur's eyelids couldn't help twitching. This must be the power of a demon. After pondering for a moment, he raised his hand and lifted the reins in his hand. Pineapple, who was sitting on him, immediately understood his intention. It raised its front hooves and spun around, but turned its body to the back. Retreat! Count Antisur gave the order in a deep voice. Although he had only made a simple contact with the Kingdom of Ruhr's army, he could clearly tell that he had seriously underestimated the might of the military magic machines. Even the strongest heavy cavalry of the Glory Regiment had been wiped out. In front of the incomparably powerful military magic machines, he was certain that his subordinates couldn't resist at all and could only choose to retreat. Seeing that Count Antisur had finally decided to retreat, the adjutant was filled with joy and quickly passed down this order. But when the remaining Glory Regiment finished adjusting their formation with difficulty and were prepared to retreat, there were several dozen flames that flew out of the sky and fell into the Glory Regiment's formation. Hong! A flame fell exactly 2 meters away from Count Antisur. Count Antisur only had time to widen his eyes. Just as a shocked expression appeared on his face, an abnormally bright flame and a huge, unstoppable shockwave had already engulfed him and his pineapple. Chapter 1083. The flames of war weren't just ignited in the Kingdom of Ruhr. At the same time that Count Antisur died, 2,400 kilometers to the north, at the border between the Drake Duchy and the Frankish Kingdom, there was an army that was several times larger than the Brilliant Light Army that was a mix of soldiers from the Marlow Empire and the Frankish Kingdom. There was an army that was several times larger than the Brilliant Light Army that was only several thousand people fighting at the border. However, the situation on the battlefield was clearly leaning towards this army of several thousand people. The allied army of the Malay Empire and the Frankish Kingdom had been completely suppressed from beginning to end and couldn't resist at all. The commander in charge of this operation, the Malay Empire's Army General Raven Marquis, had a dark look on his face. Seeing the flashes of the magic cannons in the sky and hearing the explosions that came from his army, he couldn't hold back the rage in his heart. "Where's our magic cannon team? Why haven't they caught up yet?" The commander-in-chief Gyudor Marquis on the side gave a sigh before shaking his head. "There's no other way, the magic cannons can't keep up. They should be at least 20 kilometers away from here." "Then why did those fellows already set up their magic cannons? Why can't we do it?" Raven Marquis angrily said. Gyudor Marquis said with a bitter smile, "Raven, those fellows were already prepared to meet us here, so of course they already set up their magic cannons. We had to travel several hundred kilometers from the Empire to come here. How could we compare to them in terms of preparation? If it wasn't for the fact that there was a complete road, it would be a problem if we could transport those heavy magic cannons." Hearing this, Raven Marquis knit his brows even tighter. "Why are our magic cannons so heavy? The new Flyer's magic cannons can be easily pulled around, it's much lighter and its firepower is much stronger." Gyudor Marquis' bitter smile was filled with helplessness. It's already good that those people at the Magic Weapon Research Facility can develop the magic cannons. How could they be qualified to make them the same as the new flyer? If they really had the ability, we wouldn't have needed to start this war, right? Raven Marquis thought for a bit before slowly nodding. Speaking of this, I always thought that the Drake Duchy's Grand Duke Caroline was a very wise woman. She would obediently obey us, or at the very least remain neutral. I never thought that she would unexpectedly stand on the side of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce. It really is a bit unexpected. Gyudor Marquis's lips that had a deep smile. Marquis Caroline Marquis, Marquis 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 Marquis. Marquis 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 Maris new flyer? Hey, women are creatures that are easily controlled by emotions in the end. Raven Marquis shook his head with a look of disdain. She hasn't thought about it. Even if the Drake Duchy can obtain support from the new flyer, with a small duchy like them, what can they use to resist our Malor Empire? But aren't we being blocked here right now? Gyudor Marquis spread his hands. Moreover, don't forget, even if we take care of Duke Caroline, there is an even more troublesome and hard-to-deal with woman waiting for us. Raven Marquis' expression changed slightly. Queen Seveni? This fellow is said to have a good relationship with Sui. Even her only son is said to have been born from an affair with Sui. The Lampari Kingdom's strength is not something the Drake Duchy can compare to. Adding in the fact that the Lampari Kingdom's magic machine industry has developed the longest and is the most mature, if she is determined to support the new flyer, it really will be troublesome. This is something that we already expected. There's nothing to be surprised about. Gyudor Marquis said. Compared to this, what I care more about is how those fellows from the Sac Kingdom are doing. Around 1,300 kilometers to the west was the new northern border between the Sac Kingdom and the Lampari Kingdom. Compared to the Muerto mountain range between the two countries, this new border was close to 100 kilometers to the north. A large piece of land that belonged to the Sac Kingdom was now part of the Lampari Kingdom's territory. Therefore, the Lampari Kingdom's northern army had moved 100 kilometers to the north, entering the heart of the Sac Kingdom. But like this, they had lost the natural barrier of the Muerto mountain range, making the northern army's defenses a bit strained. It was far from being as thorough as the Muerto mountain range before. It was a good thing that the Sac Kingdom had been very honest in the past few years and didn't cause any problems, so it had continued like this. However, today, this incomplete defense had aroused the greed of some people. A team of around 3,000 people quietly went around the forest outside Randytown, heading to the Lampari Kingdom's northern army's post to the west of Randytown. There were 500 soldiers from the Lampari Kingdom's northern army stationed in this post. They were responsible for defending an area of 10 kilometers with Randytown as the center. With only 500 people guarding such a large area, naturally it was impossible to cover everything. So the Sac Kingdom's army of 3,000 people smoothly approached the guard station, not meeting any obstacles along the way. Seeing the post lit up because it was close to night, this large group from the Hungry Wolf Regiment followed the plan and surrounded it. Their goal was to wipe out the 500 soldiers of the Lampari Kingdom's northern army and take all the military supplies in the post. The Lampari Kingdom's northern army had always been supported by the new flyer, so they had large amounts of military magic machines. Although there were only 500 people, they had military magic machines that could compare to the entire Hungry Wolf Regiment. If they fought head-on, these 3,000 people might not be a match for the 500 Northern Army soldiers. But if they ambushed them now, the military magic machines wouldn't be able to play much of a role. As long as they got close, the deciding factor would be the number of people. The 3,000 soldiers of the Hungry Wolf Legion crept to within 200 meters of the garrison. Then, a whistle suddenly sounded in the night sky. All the soldiers rushed out from their hiding places and charged at the garrison with all their might. They had to charge in before the Northern Army could react and fight with the Northern Army. Only then would they have a chance of winning. However, even when the 3,000 Hungry Wolf Regiment soldiers reached the walls of the post, there was still no reaction from the post. There were no Northern Army soldiers that came out, and there were no battle cries that came from inside. This post was like it had suddenly died. After a bit of hesitation, the Hungry Wolf Regiment commander in charge of the 3,000 soldiers gave a signal and a group of people charged into the post. However, when the first soldier climbed up the wall and prepared to enter the post, there was a bright red light that came from the wall. There were also balls of fiery red light bursting out from the ground outside the walls. Hong, 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 hong. A series of dense explosions resounded throughout the night sky. The flames of the explosions instantly lit up the sky, which had begun to darken due to the darkness of the night, with a red hue. Most of the 3,000 Hungry Wolf Regiment soldiers that surrounded the post had been killed in the blink of an eye, and most of the rest had lost their battle strength from the explosions. In a short period of time, of the 3,000 Hungry Wolf Regiment soldiers, there were less than 500 that could still fight. But when the remaining 500 knew that they had fallen into a trap and were prepared to retreat, the sound of countless crossbow bolts came from behind them. After a few breaths of time, the several hundred people that could still stand had been turned into sieves by the crossbow bolt. Outside the post, there wasn't a single Hungry Wolf Regiment soldier that could stand up. Humph, a group of thieves, you really think you can escape our surveillance? The guard of Randytown, the captain of the Lampari Kingdom's Northern Army's 3rd Army's 4th Squad, Deng Pulu, appeared from the darkness outside the post. He spat in disdain at the corpses of the Hungry Wolf Regiment soldiers before turning to the northwest and taking out a small magic communicator from his chest. When he was about to make a call, he saw the red light on the magic communicator, and there was a communication request. Deng Pulu chuckled and pressed the button to connect the call. Hey Deng Pulu, how is it on your side? Are there any Sack Kingdom rats looking for you? There was a rough voice that came from the magic communicator. If it was someone familiar, just based on this voice, they would be able to tell that the fellow on the other side of the magic communicator was the guard of Tower Shield Town 20 kilometers away, Ryan. There is, but we just took care of them. What about your side? Deng Pulu asked back. Ha ha, it's just a group of rats, what is there to worry about? They're all taken care of, there aren't any problems. Ryan replied. That's good. Deng Pulu nodded. Deng Pulu nodded. You don't need me to tell you what to do next, right? Hey, is there a need for you to say that? The orders have already come from above. Alright, quickly clean up your side and we'll meet up after I'm done here. Then we'll teach those Sack Kingdom brats a lesson. Alright, let's keep in touch. Deng Pulu hung up and looked up at the calm night sky before letting out a soft sigh. Since the war with the Sack Kingdom last time, they had been living a peaceful life for close to 10 years. Now those idiots from the Sack Kingdom thought that they could use the Kanla Empire and the Mala Empire's declaration of war against the Principality of Constantine and the new flyer to launch a counterattack against the Lampari Kingdom. They really were thinking too much. Hey, I want to let you idiots know that the current Lampari Kingdom is 10 times stronger than before. Chapter 1084. The flames of war instantly lit up all of Signs. At the beginning of June, the Kanla Empire's army invaded the Kingdom of Ruhr. Following that, the Mala Empire and the Fok Kingdom's army invaded the Drake Duchy, fighting a fierce battle with the Drake Duchy and the Lampari Kingdom's army on the border. At the same time, the Sack Kingdom's army gathered to attack the Lampari Kingdom's northern army. If these three places were connected, one would find that the three armies were all pointing to the same place, which was the Principality of Constantine in the southwest corner of the continent. Accurately speaking, they were pointing to the new flyer. Moreover, the flames of war weren't just limited to the southwest corner of the continent. Before the flames of war were ignited, the 47 countries that had listed the new flyer as enemies had already put pressure on the surrounding countries, asking them to expel the new flyer from their borders. Otherwise, they would be regarded as supporting the new flyer and would be listed as enemies. Under the pressure and consideration of benefits, there were many countries that didn't declare the new flyer as an unwelcome company. They sealed all the bases, factories, and shops that the new flyer had set up in their countries. Of course, there were some countries that didn't care about this warning and maintained their cooperation with the new flyer. These countries included the Nosdormu Business Union Kingdom and the Duchy of Wales, the 16 countries that had deep cooperation with the new flyer. So after the flames of war were ignited in the southwest corner of the continent, these 16 countries were also attacked by one or even several countries. The targets of these attacks were the various bases of the new flyer. Since the war between the Kanla Empire and the Mala Empire 40 years ago, this could be considered the war that the Signs had launched in the past few decades that involved the most countries and the most wide-scale war. The target of this war wasn't a country, but rather a company. This was the most strange war in the history of the Signs. In the eyes of most people, no matter how powerful New Flyer was and how powerful their military magic machines were, it was impossible for them to truly contend against a massive empire like the Kanla Empire. Not to mention that this was the first time the Kanla Empire and the Mala Empire had joined hands since they were established. Adding in the Marlow Magic Kingdom, the Dror Kingdom, the Franks Kingdom, and other countries with decent strength, they could be considered to have gathered most of the power in Signs. Even if the new flyer had the support of the Lampari Kingdom, the Kingdom of Ruhr, the Drake Duchy, and other countries, how could it resist such a terrifying force? Therefore, most people believed that New Flyer, the company that led the magic machine industry on the continent, was about to come to an end. However, when the flames of war were ignited, what happened next made the entire continent speechless. The first to ignite the flames of war was the Kanla Empire. But as the vanguard of the Kanla Empire's army, the first to invade the Kingdom of Ruhr, one of the 10 elite armies of the Kanla Empire, the Radiant Regiment, had been wiped out in just half a day of fighting with the Kingdom of Ruhr's army. The army commander Count Antasur had even died in battle. After that, the army of 60,000 from the Mala Empire and the Franks Kingdom was stopped by the army of less than 20,000 from the Drake Duchy and the Lampari Kingdom at the border between the Drake Duchy and the Franks Kingdom. Both sides had been fighting for 2 days. The magic cannons and logistics of the Marlow Empire and the Frankish Kingdom's army had been bombarded by the Fresteck Chamber of Commerce's magic airships and had been wiped out in the end. After losing their supplies and the magic cannons that they relied on the most, they were forced to retreat from the Drake Duchy, but they were also bombarded by the magic airships of the New Flyer during their retreat. Although there were 2 great magicians and several adept magicians accompanying the army, the final result was that 2 great magicians died on the spot. A total of 26 of the 37 adept magicians died in battle, and 11 of them barely managed to escape. In the end, the Allied army suffered heavy losses from the bombing of the magic airships and the pursuit of the Drake Duchy and the Lampuri Kingdom. There were only 20,000 people that managed to escape back to the Falk Kingdom, which could be considered a heavy defeat. However, compared to the losses of the Sak Kingdom, the losses of the Kanla Empire and the Marladi Empire weren't considered that much. In order to cooperate with the attacks of the Kanla Empire and the Mala Empire, the Sak Kingdom that had already reached an agreement with Dark Red had attacked the Lampari Kingdom's northern army, trying to restrain the Lampari Kingdom's side. However, the Hungry Wolf Regiment that had sent 6 large groups for a total of 30,000 people had been fiercely counterattacked by the Lampari Kingdom's northern army without exception. Of the 30,000 people, less than 4,000 had escaped. The more important thing was that the Lampari Kingdom's northern army had immediately launched a counterattack against the Sak Kingdom. If one were to talk about the complete set of military magic machines, other than the New Flyers Guards, the other army in the signs was the Lampari Kingdom's Northern Army. Since close to 20 years ago, the Lampari Kingdom had been developing a good relationship with the New Flyer to build the Northern Army. After close to 20 years of training, the Lampari Kingdom's Northern Army had already evolved into a new army with a complete set of military magic machines. Just in terms of the magic airships equipped with military magic machines, the Northern Army had 15 of them, and there were countless other kinds of military magic machines. This kind of army of over 50,000 people, it could be imagined how strong they were. Even if the Sac Kingdom had been developing military magic machines over the years, there was no doubt that they couldn't compare to the military magic machines that the Lampari Kingdom's Northern Army had from the New Flyer. So as soon as they fought, the Sac Kingdom's army kept retreating. In just half a month, the Lampari Kingdom's Northern Army had defeated all the resistance from the Sac Kingdom's side and had successfully broken through the Sac Kingdom's capital, Nordham City. The Sac Kingdom's king had already escaped with some ministers before the city was broken, so the Sac Kingdom's capital had fallen. At the same time, after the Lampari Kingdom and the Drake Duchy's army repelled the Mala Empire's army, they didn't stop and directly invaded the Fok Kingdom. They were like a hot knife through butter, repelling the three armies of the Fok Kingdom and the reinforcements sent by the Mala Empire. In the end, when they reached the Fok Kingdom's capital, they chose to retreat and built new fortifications on the border with the Drake Duchy. After this battle, the Fok Kingdom's army had lost most of their forces and they were heavily injured. They didn't have the ability to fight the Drake Duchy at all. The Mala Empire's side never expected that they would be defeated this quickly and this miserably. Even with the reinforcements still being organized, they couldn't attack for a while. So the Drake Duchy's north was temporarily at peace. But the Kingdom of Ruhr's side to the south wasn't at peace at all. After the Radiant Regiment was almost completely destroyed and even the regiment commander Count Antasur had died in battle, the Kandla Empire was filled with rage and immediately sent an army to invade the Kingdom of Ruhr. Although the Kingdom of Ruhr had some military magic machines, the Kandla Empire was well prepared. They had sent an army of 180,000 soldiers, invading from many directions. At this time, the effects of the Norton Duchy merging with the Kandla Empire could be seen. Originally, if they wanted to enter the Kingdom of Ruhr from the Kandla Empire, they could only choose from the east and the northeast of the Kingdom of Ruhr. But after the Norton Duchy merged with the Kandla Empire, the north of the Kingdom of Ruhr was completely open to the Kandla Empire. This allowed the Kandla Empire to send an army of 180,000 soldiers to invade from 6 different directions. The Kingdom of Ruhr only had 50,000 soldiers, so it was impossible for them to completely resist the invasion of 180,000 soldiers. But at this time, the New Flyer made a statement to the outside world. For the first time, the Kandla Empire and the Mala Empire made a public statement to refute the accusations made by the New Flyer. In the statement, the New Flyer stated that the New Flyer had always been cooperating with the two empires, promoting the magic machine industry in the two empires. They wanted to improve the daily lives of the citizens of the two empires and promote the development of the two empires. However, the two empires had inverted black and white, slandering the Frestek Chamber of Commerce for participating in reactionary activities. Without any reason or basis, they had closed down the various industries of the Frestek Chamber of Commerce in the two empires. Not only did this bring large economic losses to the Frestek Chamber of Commerce, it even caused serious casualties. Regarding this, the New Flyer could not accept it and strongly condemned it. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was that the New Flyer stated in the second half of the statement that the Drake Duchy and the Kingdom of Ruhr were long-term strategic partners of the New Flyer. Now that the two empires had launched a military invasion against the Drake Duchy and the Kingdom of Ruhr, the New Flyer would not just stand by and watch. They would support the two empires according to the Strategic Cooperation Agreement and help them resist the invasion of the two empires. The new flyer also stated that this support was not only in terms of resources, but also in terms of military support. In other words, the new flyer guards would officially announce their participation in the war. Chapter 1085. On the morning of the 28th of June, a large transport magic car quickly passed by a plain on the northern border of the Kingdom of Ruhr before slowly stopping in front of a valley. The commander of the St. Joan Regiment, one of the 10 elite regiments of the Canla Empire, Roman Legel, jumped out of the passenger seat of the large transport magic car in the middle. He habitually rubbed his butt, but he found that his butt didn't feel any pain at all. He couldn't help turning to look at the soft cushion in the passenger seat before curling his lip. It really is more comfortable sitting in this thing. It's a pity that those stubborn old fellows aren't even willing to admit this fact. It really is pitiful. After muttering this, Legel waved his hand and called over an adjutant. Send some scouts to check the situation in the valley in front. Make sure there aren't any ambushes. The adjutant left with this order, and after a while, a small team of scouts quickly rode over. Although the Canla Empire's military had begun to reflect after their 2 defeats against the Kingdom of Ruhr, placing importance on the military magic machines that most people didn't care about before, the Canla Empire's military headquarters had a very deep tradition, and all the armaments were related to the interests of many people. There was a lot of pressure to change, so it had always been a very troublesome problem for the army to change their equipment. Moreover, the Canla Empire's military headquarters had over 500,000 soldiers, so it was impossible for them to change their equipment all at once. Adding in the fact that the new flyer's production capacity had always been low and the military magic machines had always been strictly controlled, the Canla Empire's military headquarters hadn't been able to purchase enough military magic machines to equip their regiments. In the past few years, the Canla Empire had obtained some military magic machine technology from the new flyer and had embarked on the path of self-development. They had indeed developed a series of military magic machines based on the military magic machines sold by the Shinfei Chamber of Commerce and had entered the stage of mass production. With these things, the Canla Empire had the confidence to fall out with the new flyer. But this was far from enough to satisfy the large demands of the army headquarters, so the large armies of the Canla Empire were in a strange state. The traditional bows, spears, war horses, horse carriages, and other things were mixed in with the new military magic machines and the large transport magic cars, making it look very chaotic. This was something that could not be helped. The military could not satisfy the needs of all the legions, so they could only distribute a little based on the situation. Only that idiot Antisir would refuse to change his old ideas. In the end, he's dead now, not even his bones are left. Thinking of this, Regger's lips curled into a contemptuous smile. In the Kandra Empire's army headquarters, there were quite a few people like Count Antuso who refused to accept new things and still insisted on the old ideas of war. They were called the old school by people like Rager who were willing to accept change, and they were called the new school. Before this, when the old school compared to the new school, the old school had the advantage. But this time, after Count Antisir's brilliant regiment was almost wiped out, the old school lost their voice and the new school quickly took control of the military headquarters. In the army sent to attack the Kingdom of Ruhr, most of the new school officers were the new school officers. Regger was the most active of the new school officers. This time, he took the initiative to ask the military headquarters to lead the St. Joan Regiment as the main force of the Third Front Army, invading the Kingdom of Ruhr from the north. If it was a traditional old-school officer, although they would be vigilant in a valley like this and send out scouts to see if there was an ambush, they definitely wouldn't be as careful as Regger, sending out scouts 2 kilometers away from the valley. If the old-school officers knew about this, they would laugh at Regger for being too cowardly. However, Redger was very clear that he didn't choose this distance because he was cowardly, rather it was because he knew that the Kingdom of Roar's army was equipped with large amounts of magic cannons. The range of the magic cannons was easily over 2 kilometers, or even 3 kilometers. Even at this distance, it wasn't 100% safe. So in order to make sure there weren't any problems, Redger had to be a bit more careful. Watching the scouts climb up the cliffs on both sides of the valley, Redger couldn't help shaking his head and cursing. Damn, those stingy people at the military headquarters, why aren't they willing to buy magic airships? If I had several dozen— oh no, even if it was just a single magic airship, it would be fine. I could just send the magic airship over to take a look. Why would I need to go through all this trouble and send scouts? Redger suddenly turned to look at the center of the army. There was a magnificent horse carriage that was very conspicuous in the middle of a group of soldiers, looking very out of place. In the horse carriage was the leader of the St. Joan Army's magicians, Great Magician Yale, who was a 4th grade Great Magician. Redger hesitated a bit before quickly walking to the side of the horse carriage. "Your Excellency Yale, can I ask you to make a move?" Redger respectfully asked the person in the horse carriage. Although he was the commander of the St. Joan Army, the magician system was independent of the army and wasn't under the control of the army headquarters. Not to mention that Great Magician Yale was a 4th grade Great Magician, one of the top magicians in the Canla Empire other than the 9 Great Magicians. His position was even higher than the commander Redger. The curtain of the horse carriage was opened and Great Magician Yale's wrinkled face was revealed. "Make a move." Great Magician Yale slightly knit his brows with a doubtful look. "We haven't met any enemies yet. What do you want me to make a move?" Redger revealed a smile and explained, "It's like this, Your Excellency Great Magician, I'm worried that the enemy has set up an ambush in front of us. There might be a magic trap, so I hope you can use your magic to see if there are any magic traps in the valley ahead." Great Magician Yale leaned out of the horse carriage and looked at the valley in the distance before knitting his brows again. "Didn't you send scouts over?" "The scouts can only see if there are any ambushes, they can't find any magic trap." Redger shook his head. "Then there's no need for me to personally go, right?" Great Magician Yale waved his hand with an impatient look. He looked back and, with a flick of his finger, a flame-red light shot out and landed on a normal-looking horse carriage in the back. After a while, a young magician around 30 years old wearing a magic robe flew over. "Great Magician Yale, do you have any orders?" The young magician respectfully asked Great Magician Yale. Great Magician Yale pointed at the valley in the distance. "Go and see if there are any magic traps in there. Our Sir Army Commander is not assured." Redger's expression slightly changed, but he still nodded and said to the young magician, "That's right. Other than that, I hope you can investigate the situation around the valley. Do you understand what I mean?" For a young magician who was only a 7th grade magician, Redger didn't need to be polite. The young magician naturally wouldn't refuse like Great Magician Yale, so after a sound of acknowledgement, he flew into the valley. "Sir Army Commander, I understand your cautiousness, but isn't your current performance a bit too careful?" Great Magician Yale suddenly said. Redger cursed in his heart, but he still had a smile on his face as he replied, "In the army, there's nothing wrong with being a bit more careful." Great Magician Yale shook his head. "You really aren't as domineering as the other soldiers I've seen, they." Hong! A violent explosion suddenly came from the distance, interrupting Great Magician Yale's words. Both of their faces changed as they looked in the direction of the explosion. They saw a cloud of smoke and dust rising from the valley in the distance, accompanied by flames. It looked like there had just been an explosion. This. Great Magician Yale's expression was a bit ugly. He had just been criticizing Redger for being too careful, but now there was an explosion in the valley. This was simply a slap to his face. Redger didn't have time to care about what Great Magician Yale was thinking at this time. He carefully looked at the valley in the distance, and his expression changed. After the explosion, large rocks kept falling from the cliffs on both sides of the valley. The rumbling sounds didn't stop, and from time to time, there would be a series of explosions, causing even more large rocks to fall. In the blink of an eye, the 10-meter-wide path in the valley was filled with countless large rocks, completely blocking the path. Great Magician Yale, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to make a move this time, Redger said with a bitter smile. Great Magician Yale didn't dare directly refuse this time, so he raised a brow in response. Other than you personally making a move, I don't think anyone else has the ability to clear a path from there. Moreover, I'm worried that there might be other traps inside. Great Magician Yale looked at the situation in the valley and silently nodded. The place they were heading towards was surrounded by a mountain range. Within a radius of 50 kilometers, there was only one valley that they could pass through. If they didn't take this route and took a detour, it would take at least a few more hours. That would seriously delay their timing. To clear a path from the collapsed valley, normal magicians naturally couldn't do it. Only a great magician like him could do it. All right, I'll go take a look at the situation first. If there aren't any traps, send some people over. I need people to help clean up the mess. All right. Great Magician Yale said this before his body trembled, and he flew into the air, quickly flying towards the valley in the distance. When he was halfway there were several fire-red lights that cut through the sky from both sides, flying towards the St. Joan army. Chapter 1086. Great Magician Yale in the air could feel the powerful magic energy coming from these fiery red lights, and his heart was filled with shock. If he wasn't wrong, these fiery red lights should be the light from the magic cannonballs. If these magic cannonballs fell into the St. Joan army's formation, the consequences would be unimaginable. Thinking of this, Great Magician Yale didn't dare hesitate. He released all the magic in his body, and several bolts of lightning shot out from his hand, hitting the magic cannonballs. However, just as the lightning came into contact with the fiery red lights, a faint green light lit up around the lights at the same time. In an instant, the lightning was completely neutralized and did not have any effect on them at all. Great Magician Yale was instantly shocked. These bolts of lightning didn't look like much, but they were the 8th level spell, Thunder Rage. Each bolt of lightning contained a terrifying might. He thought that he could rely on magic to destroy these magic cannonballs, but he never thought that these magic cannonballs would be able to defend against magic attack. They could even block a powerful 8th level spell. However, there was no time for him to be shocked or think about the reason. Seeing that the magic cannonballs were about to fall, Great Magician Yale didn't dare hesitate at all. He released all the magic in his body and created a large magic shield in the air, covering the soldiers of the St. Joan army below. Great Magician Yale was most proficient in wind magic. This wind magic shield that could block 9th level spells and even block forbidden spells was released, creating a faint cyan light in the air that dyed the sky a faint cyan. The soldiers of the St. Joan army below saw the magic cannonballs falling and were panicking. When they saw Great Magician Yale release his magic shield, they let out a sigh of relief. However, as soon as a smile appeared on their faces, they found that when the fiery red lights touched Great Magician Yale's magic shield, they didn't slow down at all. They directly passed through the magic shield and fell down. Hong, 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 hong. When the fiery red lights fell down, it immediately created an incomparably fierce explosion. As the flames exploded, countless soldiers of the St. Joan army were blasted into the air. The scene instantly fell into chaos. Redger's eyes opened wide as he looked at the chaotic scene with incomparable shock. Then he looked up at Great Magician Yale in the sky, and a chill filled his heart. Great Magician Yale could be said to be his greatest reliance against the army of the Kingdom of Roar and the guards of the New Flyer, but now that Great Magician Yale couldn't protect the army, how would the St. Joan army face the enemy? Great Magician Yale in the air was even more shocked than Redger. That magic shield was an advanced wind elemental magic shield that he had developed on his own, and he was proud of it. However, he didn't expect that not only did it fail to block those mana cannonballs, it didn't even hinder them at all. Great Magician Yale's heart, great magicians Yale. SSSS with Magician Yale had. If it was two magicians fighting, he could think of another way to deal with it. But his main mission was to provide support and the most important protection for the St. Joan army, but he couldn't do it. Didn't that mean there was no meaning for him to stay here? Great Magician Yale couldn't help looking down. Seeing the chaotic scene below, he couldn't help feeling a trace of shame in his heart. Turning his head, he met Redger's eyes. The two of them looked at each other and instantly understood each other's thoughts. Redger forcefully gritted his teeth and loudly called for his adjutant. He gave an order: reorganize the army and retreat. The adjutant was stunned. Retreat? Sir Count, you're saying you want us to retreat? They had just entered the kingdom of Ruhr. Not to mention completing their mission, they hadn't even seen the face of the enemy, and the army commander was giving the order to retreat? This was too ridiculous. Less nonsense. Redger angrily grabbed the adjutant's collar and angrily roared, "Immediately give the order to retreat. Do you understand?" The adjutant's heart trembled and he quickly nodded. He turned around and prepared to give the order. But just as he turned around, he didn't even take 2 steps before several dozen fiery red lights flew in from both sides. Great Magician Yale, who hadn't recovered from the attack, was stunned for a moment before noticing this attack. In his shock, Great Magician Yale didn't have time to think. He used all the magic in his body and threw out all the defensive spells he knew. For a moment, the sky above the St. Joan army was filled with all kinds of colors, dyeing the sky in all kinds of colors. It was very beautiful. However, this was of no use. The dozens of fiery red lights were the same as before. They effortlessly penetrated the seemingly gorgeous magic shields and fell directly into the formation of the St. Joan army. Hong, 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 hong. A series of violent explosions rang through the sky. Every explosion and flame that appeared created a large hole in the St. Joan army's formation. After the bombardment, the St. Joan army that was barely able to maintain their formation was now in complete chaos. In fact, there were only a few thousand soldiers in the 2 bombardments. It didn't affect the foundation of the St. Joan army at all. But in this situation where they couldn't even see the enemy, and the key was that even the powerful Great Magician couldn't resist this kind of attack, the morale of the St. Joan Legion was severely damaged, and all the soldiers were filled with fear. Redger's mouth was wide open. Looking at the corpse at his feet that had been completely deformed, he swallowed hard. This corpse was the adjutant he had just sent out to give the order. A magic cannonball landed on his path and sent him flying back in front of Redger. If this magic cannonball had been slightly off and landed on Redger's head, Redger was sure that he would have died without a complete corpse. Thinking of this, Redger only felt a chill in his heart. When he heard that the Glory army was close to being wiped out and that the army's commander, Count Antisir, even died on the spot, he kept mocking Antisir in his heart. Even if he couldn't win, he could at least escape, right? But after personally participating in the battle today, he found that Count Antisir was definitely the same as him. The first thing he thought of was to escape. But in the face of such an incomparably strange attack, how could he escape? Whoosh! There was a sudden gust of wind and Great Magician Yale flew to Redger's side. "Count Redger, give the order to retreat." Great Magician Yale didn't have the slightest bit of the calm look from before. His expression was full of anxiety and a trace of panic that couldn't be concealed. Redger glanced at him, and a trace of pleasure appeared in his heart. This Great Magician Yale had been acting high and mighty ever since he saw him. Now that he saw that his magic wasn't working, he was even more afraid than him. "Yes, we have to retreat." Redger nodded and didn't reject Great Magician Yale's suggestion. "Your Excellency Great Magician, I'll have to ask you to help me." Use a sound amplification spell to send the order to retreat. Great Magician Yale looked at the chaotic situation around him and knew that it would be hard to quickly send the order, so he nodded. He flew up into the air and used his magic to send his voice out. Sir Count has given the order to retreat. Redger almost fell to the ground below. Was there anyone who gave the order to retreat like this? As expected, after hearing Great Magician Yale's voice, the St. Joan Army soldiers that were still in a state of confusion were stunned. With a bang, they all turned around and ran in the direction they came from. Redger was stunned as he watched the soldiers scatter like a tide. His heart was filled with regret. He really shouldn't have chosen Great Magician Yale, who didn't know anything about military matters, to give the order to retreat. How could these soldiers be considered retreating? They were simply running away. This was the worst situation on the battlefield. It meant that the soldiers had already lost their organization and even their rationality. It was impossible for them to listen to any orders. Seeing most of the soldiers' panicked expressions, Redger gave a bitter smile in his heart. Was this still the St. George Army that he was so proud of? But he didn't have the right to blame his soldiers. This was because even he, as the army commander, had lost his composure under such a strange and fierce attack. He even made the mistake of letting Great Magician Yale give the order to retreat. Great Magician Yale in the air saw the soldiers running away, but he didn't care at all. After thinking for a moment, he flew to the sorcerer's subordinates, who were also panicking in the air and did not know what to do. After giving them a few words, he turned around and flew back to Redger's side. "Count Redger, I'll cover your retreat." Redger looked at him and nodded. The two of them understood that without Great Magician Yale's cover, even if Redger was the army commander, he didn't know if he could safely retreat. And if Redger, the army commander, died here, then Great Magician Yale, as the highest level magician in the army, would definitely be held accountable by the army headquarters. As long as the two of them could keep their lives, even if the St. George Army was wiped out, they would still have a chance. After obtaining Redger's agreement, Great Magician Yale grabbed Redger's arm and activated his magic. A pitch-black spatial crack appeared in front of the two of them. Great Magician Yale released a magic shield on Redger's body and pulled him into the spatial crack. After a while, the two of them appeared on a plain 2 to 3 kilometers away from the battlefield. Turning around, they saw that in the distant sky, there were countless fiery red lights that kept flying, falling onto the battlefield where the two of them were. Hong, 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 hong. Hearing the explosions coming from the distance, Redger and Great Magician Yale both had sunken faces. The two of them had safely escaped, but it was hard to say how many of the St. George Army would be left behind. Chapter 1087. Above the battlefield, there was a magic airship that had been floating 800 meters above the ground since the battle began. Whether it was Redger or Great Magician Yale, they didn't notice it at all. There was no other way because it was flying too high. If one looked at it from the ground, this magic airship that was close to 100 meters long and several dozen meters wide was just a black spot in the sky that wasn't that remarkable. This magic airship came from the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's guards, and its mission was to act as a lookout. Before the St. Joan Army entered the Kingdom of Ruhr, it had already noticed the traces of the St. Joan Army and had been silently following them in the sky the entire time. St. Xiao An's army's every movement was observed by it. It then turned them to a valley about 5 kilometers southwest of the mountain. In this valley, there were 20 new magic bazookas lined up in 2 neat rows. The mountain pass was no longer filled with the sounds of the magic bazookas, rather it was peaceful again. There was smoke coming out of the muzzles of the 20 magic bazookas, which was the high temperature of the muzzles burning the impurities in the air. "Hey, those fellows from the St. Joan Army have already run out of attack range?" The captain of the 2nd Artillery Regiment under the new Flyer Guards, Blunt, muttered in a dissatisfied voice into the magic communicator in his hand. Those cowards, I haven't had my fill yet and they've all run away. There was a helpless voice that came from the magic communicator. I say, Blunt, are you really planning on killing them all? Do you know how many magic cannonballs you've wasted? Not mentioning anything else, just now, didn't you already exceed the limit? When you go back and make your report, it would be strange if Captain Hart didn't scold you. Hey! Hey hey! Blunt scratched his head and gave two dry laughs. You can't blame me, who told this thing to be so easy to use. The magic cannonballs are so fast that they can't be stopped at all. Look, before anything happened, I shot out 100 of them. 100. The voice from the magic communicator was filled with surprise. You really are good, Blunt. Captain Hart gave you a limit of 100, but you're good, you threw them all out without leaving a single one. Let me tell you, the next batch of supplies will arrive tomorrow, you can take care of it yourself. Anyway, my mission is finished, I'll bring my brothers back to rest now. But Lebro, you still have many things to do, you can't go back and rest like me. After saying this, Blanco hung up the communication and waved his hand forcefully. Brothers, it's time to pack. Blunt of you, Blunt, Blell, Blunt, 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 Blunt. After letting out a sigh, Lebro turned to look at Kandashenko, who was sitting in front of the communication station. Blunt, 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 Blunt. Kandashenko raised his hand in a triumphant gesture to Libro. The news from the other sides is all good news. The other 3 front armies of the Kanla Empire have been defeated and the remaining 2 will be in attack range soon. If nothing unexpected happens, they won't be able to run. Very good. Send the battle report back, and then we'll follow the plan and head to. Blunt walked in front of a giant round table in the center of the magic airship. There was a giant map of the Kingdom of Roar made of light on the table. Blunt looked at it for a bit before pointing at the upper right corner of the map. Head to the 11th district and try to get there in 2 hours. Then form a magic airship formation with the 13th, 17th, 36th, and 47th airship groups and wait for the next order. Yes. Yes. There were orderly sounds of acknowledgement from the magic airship. The magic airship turned in the air and flew off in a northeast direction. After a while, the magic airship had already disappeared into the horizon, leaving the battlefield far behind. Around 250 kilometers to the northeast of the battlefield where the St. John's army had been routed, there was the largest plain in the north of the Kingdom of Roar, the Indra Plains. These plains occupied the entire north of the Kingdom of Roar, being over 500 kilometers from east to west and over 300 kilometers from north to south. If they wanted to enter the Kingdom of Roar from the north, they couldn't go around these plains. According to the estimates of the Kanla Empire's army headquarters before this operation, since the Kingdom of Roar was at a disadvantage in terms of military strength, they would give up on the plains to the north and retreat to the Anlis Mountains to the south of the Indra Plains. But when the 2 main armies of the Kanla Empire's Third Front Army entered the Indra Plains, they had only gone 50 kilometers before finding traces of the Kingdom of Roar from the reports of their scouts. Are the Ruzan people crazy? The commander of the left wing of the Third Front Army, the commander of the Golden Eagle Cavalry Regiment, Gerald knit his brows as he revealed a confused look. On these endless plains, could it be that they think they can stop our army? The commander of the right wing of the Third Front Army beside him, the commander of the Scarlet Sun Regiment Nerarov, had a serious look. He shook his head when he heard this. Gerald, you can't look down on the Ruzan people. Don't forget, the brilliant regiment was almost completely wiped out by them, and even that fellow Andasur died in battle. We should be careful. Che, that waste Andasur only knew how to show off with the 3,000 heavy cavalry his ancestors left him, but he forgot that the heavy cavalry didn't represent everything. Now not only is he dead, even the 3,000 heavy cavalry are finished and his family will be finished as well. Nerarov looked at Gerald with a bit of dissatisfaction. Although he didn't have a good impression of Antisir, who was too arrogant, now that Antisir was dead and even the brilliant regiment under his name had been completely wiped out, as a young high-ranking officer of the Canla Empire who was around the same age as him, he couldn't help feeling a bit sad. No matter what, we should still be careful. The Kingdom of Ruhr's army has always been supported by the new flyer, so I think that they should be equipped with quite a few good military magic machines. So we shouldn't underestimate them because they have fewer people, otherwise there won't be any good result. Alright, I'll pay attention. Don't worry, I'm not joking. Gerald raised his hands to show that he really meant it. Gerald raised his hand. I've seen the power of the military magic machines more than you. Even the things that those guys in the military headquarters made by imitating the new flyer's military magic machines are so powerful. How can I underestimate the Kingdom of Ruhr's army that has the authentic Shinfei brand of military magic machines? Well, it's good that you know. Nararov nodded. Like Gerald, he should be regarded as a new generation in the military headquarters. He was one of the generals who knew more about military magic machines and supported the reform of military magic machines. They were more familiar with the impact of military magic machines on an army's combat effectiveness and even the change of the entire war pattern than many old generals in the Canla Empire's military headquarters. They also accepted it faster. Based on their persistence and hard work, the Golden Hawk Knights and the Red Sun Regiment that they led respectively could be said to be the two regiments of the Canla Empire that invaded the Kingdom of Ruhr this time, equipped with all kinds of military magic machines. Take Gerald's Golden Hawk Knights as an example. Although they were still a knight regiment in name, other than having some horse carriages in charge of logistics, the Golden Hawk Knights didn't even have a single horse. Currently in the Golden Hawk Knights, they had a total of 67 large transport magic cars, 103 large magic armored vehicles that were modified from the large transport magic cars, 30 genuine 60mm magic cannons from the new flyer, and 100 imitation 60mm magic cannons from the Canla Empire's military headquarters. Adding in the 3,000 magic repeating crossbows and 800 individual magic rockets, it could be said that in terms of firepower, there wasn't a single Canla Empire's army that could compare to the Golden Hawk Knight. This was reflected in the military drill that the Canla Empire held at the beginning of this year. The Golden Hawk Knights had displayed their powerful attack power in the drill, and most of the regiments couldn't resist them at all. As for the Red Sun Regiment, they were one of the few regiments that could resist the Golden Hawk Knight. Compared to the Golden Hawk Knights, the Red Sun Regiment had much fewer magic cannons. They only had 60 single-barrel magic cannons from the Canla Empire's military headquarters. But the Red Sun Regiment had a shocking 500 large transport magic cars. Each large transport magic car could at most hold 50 people, so the Red Sun Regiment's 20,000 people could all sit in the large transport magic cars and travel at high speed. It was because of this that the Red Sun Regiment and the Golden Hawk Knights were chosen as the vanguard of the Third Front Army. What they cared about was the powerful attack power and mobility of these two regiments. Nararov and Gerald were confident in their regiment. As for how effective they would be against the Kingdom of Ruhr's army, it would depend on their performance in the upcoming battle. Chapter 1088. 20 minutes later, the Golden Hawk Knights and the Red Sun Legion continued to move south for more than 10 kilometers before they saw the Kingdom of Ruhr's army in front of them. Gerald picked up the binoculars and looked ahead. He immediately frowned. In the army of over 10,000 people in front, there were mainly the flags of the Rudsun Kingdom. But what really caught Gerald's attention was a flag that wasn't complicated and had a very simple design. There was only a single flag with half a wing embroidered on it. On the sign's continent, there wasn't a single person who didn't know what this flag represented. It was the new flyer. The new flyer guards also joined the battle? Gerald's expression was slightly solemn. When we set off a while ago, the new flyer didn't make a specific statement. How come they have already sneaked in? What's so strange about that? Nerarov rolled his eyes. This time, we are obviously going for the new flyer. If they don't send their guards to join the battle, will they only join the battle when we reach the Principality of Constantine and the new flight commerce main base? Gerald smiled bitterly and shook his head. That's not what I meant. I just meant that if the new flyer guards on the other side sneaked in, I'm afraid that today's battle won't be easy. We will meet them sooner or later. If we meet them earlier, we will have more opportunities to understand them and deal with them in the future. Nerarov also picked up the binoculars and observed the situation on the other side. He also frowned. All the countries on the continent say that the new flyer guards are very powerful. But in fact, for so many years, the new flyer guards have only fought a few times. I don't know how powerful they are. That's why I hate this kind of guy who I can't figure out at all. But the Kingdom of Ruhr's army has only received a little support from the new flyer, and their combat power has already become so strong. You can imagine the combat power of the new flyer guards. Gerald sighed and looked a little distressed. Besides, it's not like you don't know how powerful the military magic machines new flyer sold us are. Our old toys won't be able to withstand them, and I'm sure that new flyer will only sell us some low-level military magic machines, or even military magic machines that have been eliminated by them. They will definitely keep the really good stuff in their hands. That's obvious. Nerarov spread out his hands, looking equally helpless. Who told the Frestek Chamber of Commerce to be the only company in this world that can make these things? They looked at each other in silence for a while. Suddenly, Gerald wiped his face and spat on the ground. Bah! The battle hasn't even started yet, so why are the two of us constantly lowering our morale? The Frestek Chamber of Commerce's guards are definitely strong, but we have more people than them in the end. Then again, we also have military magic machines, so if they dare fight us on the prairies, we'll crush them with our numbers. Well, according to some information collected by the Glory Legion, the Kingdom of Ruhr's army has the ability to attack from a very long distance. Now we... Nerarov looked up, estimated the distance, and raised his right hand. The several crimson Helios guards behind him immediately gave the order. It didn't take long for the entire crimson Helios guards to stop. Gerald and Nerarov had known each other for many years. When he saw Nerarov's actions, he immediately understood what he meant and ordered the Gold Eagle Knights to stop. All right, we're about 5 kilometers away from here. It should be beyond their attack range. Let's reorganize our formation and prepare to attack, Nerarov said. All right. Gerald, Nerarov, and a few other military advisors got together and had a short pre-battle discussion. They decided to use the Golden Hawk Knight Legion as the support while the Red Sun Legion used their high mobility to attack from both sides at the same time. These two regiments were famous elite regiments of the Kanla Empire. Adding in the fact that Gerald and Nerarov were good commanders, now that they had decided on the strategy, it didn't take long for them to reorganize their formation. What the two of them found strange was that while they were discussing the strategy and the formation, the Kingdom of Ruhr's army and the new flyer guards on the other side didn't move at all, as if they were waiting for them to attack. However, even if they found it strange, since they had already led their army here, they couldn't just retreat. Gerald tidied up his clothes and jumped onto the roof of a large transport magic car. He pulled out the sword at his waist and pointed it at the sky. Attack! The 23,000 soldiers of the Gold Eagle Knights set out in an orderly manner. At the very front were heavy-armored shield-bearers who held giant shields and acted as guards. Following closely behind them were the crossbow-bearers armed with magic-repeating crossbows and special longbows. As for the center of the formation, there were 130 single-barreled magic cannons that moved a bit slower. Actually, the new flyers' single-barreled magic cannons were all equipped with magic trailers, so they could move at a speed of 40 kilometers per hour on these plains. But although the Kandla Empire's single-barreled magic cannons were also equipped with magic trailers, they couldn't solve the problem of the coordination between the magic trailers and the cannon. Because of the problem of materials, there were often short shafts, so they were limited to a speed of 30 kilometers per hour. The actual speed was only around 20 kilometers per hour, so it seriously slowed down the speed of the entire army. Of course, the distance between the two armies was only around 5 kilometers, so the difference between 20 kilometers per hour and 40 kilometers per hour wasn't that big. The Gold Eagle Knights only needed to bring the magic cannons within 2 kilometers of effective attack range. After the Gold Eagle Knights set out, Nerarov gave the order at the same time. The Scarlet Sun Regiment split into 3 groups. One group had 100 large transport magic cars and 5,000 soldiers to protect the Gold Eagle Knight. The other group had 200 large transport magic cars that went in an arc from the left and right, surrounding the Kingdom of Ruhr on the other side. Actually, although the Gold Eagle Knights and the Scarlet Sun Regiment were equipped with large amounts of new military magic machines to replace the swords, spears, and bows of the war horses, their tactics were still mostly based on the old ideas. For example, the tactics that the two regiments used this time was nothing more than the Kandla Empire's army breaking through the center and surrounding them from the two sides. It had to be said, there wasn't anything wrong with this tactic. It could fully display the advantages of the two regiments. However, this war was completely different from all the wars they had experienced in the past. When the Gold Eagle Knights were around 3 kilometers away from the Kingdom of Ruhr's army, the Kingdom of Ruhr's army that hadn't moved at all finally moved. It was fine if they didn't move, but once they moved, it was like thunder. Hong, 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 hong. There was a series of muffled sounds that came from the Kingdom of Ruhr's army in the distance. There were countless red lights that filled the sky as they quickly flew over. Gerald was shocked in his heart. The two sides were clearly 3 kilometers away, so why did the Kingdom of Ruhr use the magic cannons? Didn't the new flyer's magic cannons only have an attack range of 2 kilometers? But in the next moment, the ruthless facts told Gerard how wrong his judgment was. The red lights filled the sky and in just a few breaths, they had already crossed the 3 kilometers distance between the two sides and landed in the middle of the Gold Eagle Knights formation. Scatter! Gerald only had time to shout this, but he couldn't give any other orders at all. Hong, 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 hong. This time, an unusually dull yet extremely violent explosion resounded in Gerald's ears, almost deafening him. In the midst of the explosions, there were the panicked cries and pitiful cries of the surrounding Gold Eagle Knights. With just a single round of explosions, the Gold Eagle Knights' formation that had been perfect was now a bit loose. Gerald forced down the shock and panic in his heart. He grabbed a magician beside him and had him cast a sound amplification spell in front of him. Don't panic. Maintain the formation and charge forward for me. Those who retreat will be killed. Gerald instantly understood. They were both magic cannons, but the Kingdom of Ruhr's magic cannons had a much longer attack range than theirs, even exceeding it by an entire kilometer. Like this, before they reached effective attack range, they could only passively take the enemy's attacks and couldn't fight back at all. At this time, the only choice was to keep moving forward. The consequences of retreating would be even more serious than now. Gerald's voice was spread through the entire Gold Eagle Knights through the sound amplification spell. Hearing the commander's voice, the Gold Eagle Knights who had panicked from the sudden attack quickly calmed down. They reorganized their formation as they charged at the Kingdom of Ruhr's army in the distance as quickly as possible. The Scarlet Sun Regiment that had circled around on both sides didn't encounter any attacks from the Kingdom of Ruhr's army. Seeing the Gold Eagle Knights suffer an unexpected bombardment, Nerarov didn't hesitate to give the order for the Scarlet Sun Regiment to increase their speed again. The Kingdom of Ruhr's army clearly wanted to use their attack range to bombard them, so they had to get closer and disrupt the other side's formation. But when this idea appeared in his mind, there were several flames that soared into the sky from the grasslands in front of him. With several explosions, the 3 large transport magic cars in front seemed like they had been flipped over by an invisible giant. They flew into the air, and even flipped a few times in the air before slamming down. One of them had smashed into the large transport magic car in front of Nerarov, and after rolling on the ground, it landed on the front of the large transport magic car that he was sitting in. The strong vibrations wildly shook the car, and Nerarov, who was caught off guard, slammed into the front of the driver's seat, causing his head to bleed. Chapter 1089. Gerald didn't know that Nerarov was in such a dangerous situation, but when he saw several large transport magic cars being blown into the sky from the Scarlet Sun Regiment's right flank and the Scarlet Sun Regiment's soldiers being blown into the sky, he immediately knew that this was bad. Those fellows from the Kingdom of Ruhr weren't just waiting for them to attack, they had already set up traps around them and were waiting for them to charge to their death. Gerald looked at the Kingdom of Ruhr army that was much closer, and there was a trace of hesitation in his heart. Since the enemy had set traps on both sides, it was very likely that there were traps in front of them as well. If he led the Golden Eagle Knights to charge forward like this, they might step right in. But when Gerald looked at the distance between them and the Kingdom of Ruhr's army, the vigilance in his heart turned into helplessness. Although they had charged quite a bit in just a few minutes, they still hadn't entered the effective attack range of his magic cannons. If they stayed here because they were afraid of traps, the Kingdom of Ruhr's army would be able to use their magic cannons to wildly bombard them. Retreating was even worse because the losses from before would be meaningless, and they could only passively take a beating while retreating. If the Kingdom of Ruhr's army chased after them, the consequences would be unimaginable. After thinking this through, Gerald felt incomparable pain in his heart. Because the Kingdom of Ruhr's magic cannons had a range of around a kilometer more than his, he was forced into this difficult situation. It was impossible to retreat, it was impossible to stop, and it was possible for them to step into a trap if they went forward. Damn, it would be great if the magic cannons developed by those fellows in the army headquarters could also have such a long range. Gerald cursed in a low voice and forcefully shook his head. He pulled over the magician responsible for giving orders and had him use a sound amplification spell in front of him. "Brothers, charge with me! Go faster!" After roaring out this, Gerald forcefully patted the shoulder of the driver beside him, telling him to go faster. At this time, he suddenly regretted not bringing his beloved war horse. That way, he could lead the charge like before and greatly increase the morale of his men. However, he was very clear that if he was riding a war horse, just hearing the sound of the magic cannons was enough to scare the war horse to the point that its legs turned soft and it wouldn't be able to fight at all. Not to mention that the might of the magic cannons were incomparably strong. If any one of them exploded, everything within 10 meters would become unrecognizable. In his previous life, he could ride a horse and travel back and forth in the rain of arrows without any hindrance. But in the face of such a terrifying magic cannonball attack, if he still dared to ride a horse into battle, any magic cannonball that landed next to him would kill him without a complete corpse. In the end, since the Frestec Chamber of Commerce made these military magic machines, the traditional methods of warfare had been eliminated. STSSSSSTS. Therefore, although he was reluctant to do so, he was determined to promote the deployment of military magic machines in the Golden Hawk Knights in the past few years. He also worked hard to learn and train the new combat modes of the military magic machines, hoping to keep up with the rapid changes in the situation. But now that he was on the battlefield, he found that he was still very powerless. They hadn't even fought the Kingdom of Ruhr's army yet, but with the range of the magic cannons, the enemy had already caused several thousand casualties to the Golden Eagle Knights. But he had no other choice, he could only lead the soldiers forward. Hong, 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 hong. Another round of magic cannons fell and the Golden Eagle Knights fell into chaos again. A magic cannons fell on the side of the large transport magic car that Gerald was riding in. The large shockwave caused the large transport magic car to tilt to the side, almost making people feel like they would flip over. It was a good thing that it returned to normal and kept charging forward. 3 kilometers to 2 kilometers was only a trivial kilometer. Not to mention the large transport magic car that only took 1 to 2 minutes, even if they ran, it would only take 3 to 4 minutes. However, this short distance was like a natural moat for the Golden Eagle Knight. With every step they took, there was a magic cannons that fell, taking away large amounts of soldiers. The Scarlet Sun Regiment on the flanks didn't have a good time either. It was unknown how many traps the Kingdom of Ruor's army had set up on the flanks. In short, when the large transport magic cars of the Scarlet Sun Regiment's 2 squadrons drove forward, there were endless explosions. The large transport magic cars were blown away, and the soldiers of the Scarlet Sun Regiment were instantly killed by the explosions. The most important thing was that since the first trap, the Scarlet Sun Regiment had lost the command of their commander, Nerarov. Although the vice-commander had taken command, he didn't have a good idea. Seeing the Golden Eagle Knights charging forward, he could only cooperate with Gerald and give orders to his subordinates to charge forward. Hong, 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 hong. The explosions kept coming from the front and the flank. The Kingdom of Ruor's Northern Regiment Commander Fenrir raised his binoculars to look at the situation. Although he had a serious look on his face, there was a faint smile on his lips. Captain Furio, it seems like these Kandra people can't play any tricks. The elf captain of the new flyer guards who was standing on the top of the large transport magic car with him didn't agree with this. After looking at it for a while, he said to Fenrir, "They are about to enter our effective attack range. Commander Fenrir, we can begin the second step of the plan." "All right." Fenrir nodded with a faint smile. He bent down to say a few words to the messenger waiting below. After a while, the Northern Army's magic cannons that had finished firing put away their turrets and connected them to the magic tractors, as they began to retreat in an orderly manner. "Captain Furio, I'll leave the rest to you." Fenrir grabbed Furio's hands and shook them in a serious manner. "The fate of our Kingdom of Ruor will be decided by the results of this battle." Furio wasn't used to Fenrir's sudden intimate contact and his serious tone. But after being in the new flyer for a long time, he was already used to the way humans did things. He revealed a faint smile when he heard this and said with a nod, "Please be assured, we will buy enough time for you." "Good." Fenrir gave a strong nod. Then Furio jumped out of the large transport magic car, and the surrounding Northern Army soldiers jumped into the various large transport magic cars and armored magic vehicles, as they retreated like a tide. Furio turned to look at the approaching Kanla Empire army that he could clearly see. He quickly took 2 steps and entered a strange-looking magic car on the side. Gerald looked at the retreating Kingdom of Ruor army in the distance in a daze, feeling very confused. Although they were about to enter his effective attack range, those fellows from the Kingdom of Ruor wouldn't be so scared that they would turn and run, right? Could it be that they didn't know that this was equal to exposing their backs, allowing him to chase after them and take revenge? "Charge for me. Don't let them run." Gerald couldn't think of a reason for this, but based on his basic judgment, he waved his arm and gave the order to chase. However, it was clear that the Kingdom of Ruor's army had already planned this retreat. The entire process was very smooth, and before he could close the distance between them, most of the other side had already retreated. There was only a very thin team left standing on the grassland in the distance. Gerald grabbed the binoculars in a confused manner. As far as he could see, the team that was left behind wasn't a large transport magic car team or an armored magic car team, and it wasn't a magic cannon team that only a fool would leave behind. Rather, it was a team of square cars that looked very flat with a thick steel pipe coming out of the front. They looked very fierce and strange, looking very strange. It seemed like it was some kind of magic car team that was made of this kind of thing. Heavens above, what the hell is this? Seeing that there were around 100 of these strange things, Gerald had a bad feeling in his heart. He didn't forget that among the enemy flags, there was a new flyer flag. As for the strange team that was left behind, it was the new flyer flag that was flying. Damn, it's only this strange, there's no need to be afraid of them. Gerald waved his hand in annoyance as he gave the order to charge forward. After the Kingdom of Ruor's army retreated, the Scarlet Sun Regiment that was flanking them were no longer affected by the traps on the ground. They could finally form two complete formations. But they didn't care about the strange team that was left behind, rather they chased in the direction the Kingdom of Ruor's army had retreated. But they didn't go cause trouble for that strange team, but the other side took the initiative to come. That team suddenly split into two, splitting into two groups of 50 magic cars that came to meet the Scarlet Sun Regiment on the flank. Gerald was surprised. Although the Scarlet Sun Regiment's firepower couldn't compare to the Golden Eagle Cavalry, they weren't weak at all. How could these fellows that should belong to the New Flyers Guards be this stupid, daring to fight with just these few people? Although the Scarlet Sun Regiment had lost their highest commander because Nerarov was in a coma, under the lead of the vice-commander, they were still able to band together. Seeing that the enemy didn't know their own strength and charged forward, they didn't hold back at all as they attacked. Hong, hong, hong. Since the start of the battle, the Canla Empire's magic cannons finally roared out for the first time. Several flame-red lights came out of the Scarlet Sun Regiment's formation and flew at the two groups charging forward. However, compared to the Kingdom of Ruor's magic cannons, the hit rate of the Scarlet Sun Regiment's magic cannons was a bit pitiful. Of the 50 magic cannonballs that were shot out, over half of them went far away and didn't pose any threat to the enemy at all. Although the other half fell into the enemy's formation, there weren't many that actually hit. The ones that fell near the strange magic cars were just the dirt on the grassland. They didn't affect the strange magic cars at all, they didn't even shake them at all. As for the few that fell close to the strange magic cars, even the magic cannonballs that hit them didn't have any effect at all. In front of the stunned Canla Empire soldiers, there was a faint blue glow that came from the strange magic cars. The giant shockwave from the explosion of the magic cannonballs hit the light and it was completely blocked. Even the dirt that was blown up couldn't penetrate the light. The Canla Empire's soldiers were still shocked by what had happened. There was a red glow that came from the large steel pipes in front of the strange magic cars. It instantly condensed into several flame-red lights that came out of them. Hong! Chapter 1090. The commander of the Canla Empire's expeditionary force, Duke Makaros, lowered his head and looked at the battle report in his hands. His originally tanned skin was now as dark as the sky outside due to his gloomy expression. The atmosphere in the tent seemed to have frozen in time. Everyone held their breaths and didn't even dare to breathe. They were afraid of attracting Duke Makaro's attention and causing the volcano to erupt. However, a volcano wasn't something that wouldn't erupt if you didn't want to. After a while, Duke Makaros put down the battle report and narrowed his eyes to look at the faces of the other Canla Empire's expeditionary force officers in the tent. They all lowered their heads and groaned. The other officers in the tent couldn't help but shiver. In the Canla Empire's military headquarters, other than Grand Marshal Camber Sudirman, Duke Makaros had the highest status and prestige. This time, the Empire's military headquarters allowed him to personally lead the expedition to the Kingdom of Ruor. This undoubtedly meant that the Empire's military headquarters placed great importance on this expedition. However, the expeditionary force of the Canla Empire had suffered a blow to the head on the first step of the expedition. The 6 frontline armies that were split into 6 different directions to advance towards the Kingdom of Ruor had all suffered disastrous losses within 3 days. St. John's Legion of the 4th Frontline had suffered the least losses. However, after being ambushed by the Kingdom of Ruor's army, they had lost more than 4,000 soldiers on the spot. The number of lightly injured soldiers added up to more than 10,000, causing St. John's Legion to lose nearly half of their combat strength. The ones that suffered the most losses were the Gold Eagle Legion and the Crimson Sun Legion of the 3rd Frontline Army. The Gold Eagle Legion had lost more than 10,000 soldiers due to their heavy injuries, which was equivalent to half of their forces being crippled. The Crimson Sun Legion's losses were slightly less, with more than 7,000 dead. On the other hand, the number of heavily injured soldiers wasn't as high, only around 2,000. From this point alone, one could see the cruelty of the battlefield. In comparison, the loss of manpower was not as great as the loss of resources. It was a greater blow to the two legions. In the fierce battle, the Golden Eagle Knight Regiment had lost a total of 63 large transport magic cars, and the most important magic cannons had been destroyed by 89 of them. The high firepower that the Golden Eagle Knight Regiment relied on the most was now close to being scrapped. The Scarlet Sun Regiment was even more straightforward. Of the 500 large transport magic cars they had, over 100 had been destroyed in the battle, and there were over 200 that couldn't operate normally after the battle. Like this, the Scarlet Sun Regiment's most famous large transport magic cars had been scrapped. Most importantly, due to the rupture between the Canla Empire and the New Flyer withdrew all support from the Canla Empire. This was reflected in the large transport magic cars. Now there wasn't a single official maintenance department for the New Flyer in the Canla Empire. These large transport magic cars were all purchased from the New Flyer, and now that they were broken, they couldn't rely on the New Flyer to fix them, so they could only think of a way themselves. But although there were several companies in the Canla Empire that were secretly developing large transport magic cars and had some results, it was impossible for them to reach the level of the New Flyer in terms of technology. Moreover, even if they had the technology to repair them, the Canla Empire couldn't find any suitable parts. With the current level of the magic machine industry in the Canla Empire, there were many parts that they couldn't make. So like this, the Scarlet Sun Regiment had lost most of their battle strength. If one were to summarize the results of the 6 frontline armies, out of the 130,000 people who participated in the first battle, they had only experienced one battle, but they had already lost more than 40,000 people and countless materials. They had lost close to half of their combat strength. This result was without a doubt very shocking to the Canla Empire. Even before the battle began, they had already expected that this battle wouldn't be easy because the New Flyer would definitely support the Kingdom of Ruor. But no one would have thought that this battle would be this difficult. In just the first battle, the Canla Empire had suffered such serious losses. What was even more terrifying was that the Kingdom of Ruor's losses were almost zero, because from beginning to end, out of the 130,000 soldiers of the 6 front armies, not a single one of them had clashed with the Kingdom of Ruor's army. In other words, the various armies of the Canla Empire had been passively beaten from beginning to end. They hadn't even touched the Kingdom of Ruor's army. There was no doubt that this fact shocked everyone on the Kandra Empire's side, even creating a trace of fear. But this wasn't the most shocking thing. What caught the attention of the Canla Empire's army was the 3rd Front Army. The Gold Eagle Regiment and the Scarlet Sun Regiment hadn't even been ambushed. Instead, they had suffered such terrifying losses in the battle with the Kingdom of Ruor on the Indra Great Plains. This result meant that the Canla Empire's most important advantage in numbers was gone. The Kingdom of Ruor didn't even send out many people, yet it was enough to defeat the Canla Empire's army that was several times larger than theirs. The Canla Empire's army didn't even cause any losses to the enemy. This meant that the battle strength of both sides wasn't on the same level, so the number of troops didn't have any meaning at all. If the Kingdom of Ruor's side kept having this kind of battle strength, the Canla Empire's army wouldn't have any hope of winning. Duke Makaros had a dark look on his face as he thought for a bit before suddenly looking at the Gold Eagle Regiment's commander Gerald standing to his left. "Gerald, tell me, what is going on with that strange magic car that you met?" Hearing this question, Gerald thought of the monsters he met on the battlefield, and he couldn't help revealing a look of fear. Even if it was a battle from 3 days ago, he still felt a strong sense of powerlessness when he thought of it. When he first saw those strange magic cars, Gerald was only doubtful. He had ordered his subordinates to attack with the magic cannons. But then those strange magic cars told him that they weren't on the same level. Under the wild attacks of the Gold Eagle Regiment and the Scarlet Sun Regiment's magic cannons and magic rockets, those strange magic cars had easily blocked all the attack. With a single counterattack, the Gold Eagle Regiment and the Scarlet Sun Regiment suffered heavy losses. With such an exaggerated difference in battle strength, it even made Gerald suspect that these fellows were demons that the new flyer had pulled from another world. But of course this was an illusion. The fact was that the new flyer already had these terrifying military magic machines that people couldn't think of a way to stop or defeat. Hearing that Duke Makaros wanted him to describe that thing, Gerald gaped his mouth and became stunned for quite a while. He didn't know how to describe it at all. Seeing Gerald in a daze, Duke Makaros gave a dissatisfied snort. "What? Gerald, have you been beaten silly by the Rudsun people? If you're afraid, scram back to the Empire for me, don't embarrass yourself here." Gerald trembled as he came back to his senses. He quickly shook his head and said, "No, no, no, Lord Duke, I'm not. Only you want me to describe what that strange magic car was. I don't know how to describe it, but I really can't think of a way to deal with those things." "You mean that we have no chance of winning against those things?" Duke Makaros raised a brow as he asked back. Seeing the killing intent in Duke Makaros' eyes, Gerald could only give a bitter laugh and give a nod. "Yes, Lord Duke. I feel that if we face them head-on, we have no way of resisting those terrifying things." Hearing this answer, the other regiments in the tent couldn't help revealing looks of surprise. Although most of the officers in the tent had participated in the battle with the Kingdom of Ruhr and had suffered losses, they knew that the Kingdom of Ruhr had many powerful military magic machines. They had all kinds of strange attacks that they couldn't do anything to. But Gerald had said that he couldn't stop those strange magic cars at all. Wasn't this too much of an exaggeration? Could it be that this kid Gerald had lost the most, so he was exaggerating the strength of the enemy to hide his own weakness? If the Scarlet Sun Regiment's commander Nerarov hadn't been in a coma and couldn't participate in this meeting, would he have used the same tone as Gerald? Duke Makaros was clearly very dissatisfied with Gerald's answer, so he said with a strong snort, "Gerald, according to what you said, shouldn't we immediately retreat? We can't beat the enemy anyway, right?" Everyone could tell that this was obviously sarcastic sarcasm. However, after thinking for a while, Gerald nodded hard and replied with a very serious expression, "Yes, Your Excellency Duke. I feel that, in a situation where we don't have the ability to deal with them, choosing to retreat for now is a wise choice." Duke Makaros was instantly filled with rage. He slapped the table beside him and pointed at Gerald as he cursed, "Gerald, if you keep shaking the morale of the army, do you believe that I won't immediately take you out to be dealt with by military law?" Gerald still wanted to defend himself, but another officer standing beside him pulled his arm and stopped him. Seeing that Gerald lowered his head and didn't say anything, Duke Makaros gave another cold snort. He looked over everyone and said with a sunken face, "Arcane Empire's army, since we've already attacked, we can't retreat before we get results. If anyone dares to shake the morale of the army in the future, don't blame me for being merciless." The group of generals and officers obeyed the order. "Now, let's discuss the next battle plan. Look here." Duke Makaros walked to a huge map hanging on one side of the tent. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, the tent's curtain was suddenly pulled open. A messenger of Duke Makaros's personal guard rushed in with a panicked expression. Without waiting for Duke Makaros to ask, the guard had already knelt on one knee in front of Duke Makaros and said in a panic, My lord, I just received news that Sven West City was attacked by an unknown army. Everyone in the tent was shocked. Sven West City was where the Expeditionary Army's logistics warehouse was located. It was equivalent to the Expeditionary Army's foundation. Now that Sven West City was attacked, then, how's the supply warehouse? Duke Makaros hurriedly asked. The supply warehouse. The warehouse was completely destroyed in the attack. The answer from the personal guard's mouth caused the tent to fall into a deathly silence. Chapter 1091. Reporting, the second Magic Airship team has successfully completed their mission and is currently heading back. Second Magic Airship team, send your mission report over and then fly back to the base in the Kingdom of Ruhr's northern province to wait for orders, waiting for the next mission. Yes. Lebro put down the magic communicator and patted the shoulder of Kandashenko. Did you hear Captain Hart's orders? Send the mission report I just drafted back to the base. All right. Kandashenko shook his head and quickly replied. His hands quickly moved over the communication console in front of him, and there was the crisp sound of keys being pressed in the cockpit. I say, can't you slow down a bit? You're so noisy. Karen, who was Lebro's assistant on the side, helping him take care of some secretarial work, as well as managing the logistics of the magic airship Parrot, knit her brows as she glared at Kandashenko. Kandashenko quickly stroked his bangs and made a confident pose as he said with a laugh, This little master is in a good mood right now, so I like tapping this fast. I say, Karen, I've found that you've been quite angry lately. Is the good day of the month coming? Karen knit her brows and kicked Kandashenko's calf without any courtesy. Kandashenko immediately grabbed his calf and cried out in pain, looking very funny. Stop messing around, finish your work for me first. Lebro reprimanded, but he couldn't help revealing a smile. Because they had just completed a very important mission, everyone on the magic airship was in a very good mood, so it wasn't a big deal to joke around. Even the serious Lebro was in a very good mood. After all, in this mission, he had led the magic airship under him and the other 9 magic airships to form a special operation team. They had directly crossed the border between the Kingdom of Ruhr and the Kanla Empire, entering close to 200 meters from the Kanla Empire's border. They had launched a surprise attack on Sven West City and successfully destroyed the logistics base of the Kanla Empire's army. The importance of this mission was self-evident, and the merit they obtained was also great. Moreover, they had directly infiltrated the borders of the Kandra Empire to launch a surprise attack. In the close to 1,000 years of history of the Kandra Empire, this was the first time that the army of another country had dared to do something like this. In that case, the new flyer guards could be said to have created history. Thinking of this, Lebro picked up the magic communicator again and called the magic airship team. After a while, the voices of the commanders of the other 9 magic airships came from inside. Hey Lebro, what's up? Could it be that the higher-ups have assigned us another mission? It can't be? We just went to the Kanla Empire and fought a big battle. No matter what, you should let us rest first. Tisk, it's not a problem to go and do something big again. Anyway, I still have ammunition on my airship. It's not a problem to go and bomb them again. We've already bombed the supply base of those Kanla Empire fellows. What other places are there to bomb? Could it be that we're going to bomb Wimbledon City? Hey, that's a good idea, let's go. Lay, stop joking around. Do you know how far this place is from Wimbledon City? It's over 2,000 kilometers. With the magic crystals we have left on the airship, if we don't resupply on the way, we can't fly there at all. You still want to bomb them? I'm just saying. Right, Lebro, you still haven't said what it is? Lebro couldn't help smiling. You fellows are so noisy, how could I say anything? It's nothing. I just want to ask if you're done with your routine inspection? If you're done, our only task is to report back to the base. TSK, I thought it was something big, but it's just going back the same way. That's right, wasting my feelings. I have one more thing to tell you. Lebro purposely paused for a moment to keep them in suspense. Lebro paused for a bit before pausing. When we return to the base, I'll ask the captain to invite you to a big meal in the city. The magic communicator was silent for a bit before it exploded in cheers. Really? Lebro, are you joking? You're really inviting us to a big meal in the city? This is great. I've been eating in the base these past few days. My mouth is so bland. Ha ha, Lebro, since you're this generous, I have no objections to you being the captain in the future. Lebro revealed a faint smile. The reason why he wanted to invite his colleagues to a big meal was because he wanted to win their hearts. But since Captain Hart had already appointed him as the captain, it meant that the higher-ups wanted to train him. The other magic airship commanders were also clear on this, so of course they didn't mind showing their attitude at this time. Of course, not everyone would be convinced. He was just giving it a try. At least on the surface, the results were good. Alright, before we reach the base, you should think about what you want to eat. Don't wait until we arrive before you make a decision. Lebro said this with a smile. He hung up the magic communicator and turned to head to the middle cabin of the magic airship. This mission was the new Flyers Magic Airship Squadron's first time penetrating the enemy's rear and destroying the enemy's supply base. This was their first time and the enemy's first time. In the history of signs, there had been cases of enemies attacking the supply base from the air, but the targets of these attacks were usually very powerful magicians, or even magicians who were at least high-grade magicians. This was the first time that normal people other than magicians had suddenly attacked with a magic airship. This kind of experience was very precious to Lebro. Actually, if he thought about it now, he found that there were many details that weren't done well. For example, they could have bombed from a higher altitude, which would have been more secretive and would have allowed them to bomb for a longer time. Of course, this would have a higher requirement for the accuracy of the magic bombs. The 10 magic airships he led this time weren't at the same level. Some were very accurate and some were very normal, so the final effects were all different. Another example was that they didn't need to throw down more than half of the magic bombs because the area of the warehouse wasn't that exaggerated. From the most precise point of view, just a few magic bombs were enough to engulf the entire warehouse in a sea of flames. Of course, if they were a bit safer and more accurate, it was enough to throw 10 or 20. Or, for example, Lebro was a person who was good at reflecting. He wanted to make a summary as soon as possible, this was his habit. But when he sat down at the table in the middle cabin, and before he even picked up his pen, Karen suddenly came out. There's a situation. Seeing Karen's serious expression, Lebro immediately threw down his pen and walked back into the cockpit. Boss, look, we might be in trouble. Hearing Lebro's footsteps, Kandashenko turned to look and pointed at the magic illusion on the control panel in front of him as he shouted out. Lebro walked over and knit his brows. He found that on the upper left side of the magic illusion, there was a small red light that kept releasing a faint glow, quickly approaching the center of the magic illusion. Seeing this, Lebro's heart tightened. This magic illusion was actually using the magic detection device on the magic airship. It kept sending out magic detection signals to detect the changes in the magic space around the magic airship, thus detecting some special situations. Using the name Sir Chairman gave it, this thing was called the magic radar. Now that the magic radar was showing a dot of light quickly approaching, it was clearly a strange situation. Based on the frequency and strength of the magic fluctuations, this should be the magic fluctuations of a flying spell. Combined with the fact that this dot of light is quickly approaching, it should mean that a magician is flying towards us. Kandashenko replied. A magician? Lebro was a little confused. Lebro was a bit confused. Then it shouldn't be an enemy. After all, it's just a magician, it can't be a threat to us. Perhaps it's just a magician passing by. No, boss, look. Kandashenko pointed at a special symbol in the lower right corner of the magic illusion with a serious expression. Based on the strength of the magic fluctuations, this flying spell isn't a low-level flying spell that a low-level magician can use. I'm even certain that this magician is at least a great magician. Other than that, I need to remind you that we are currently flying at 130 kilometers per hour. With Kandashenko's reminder, Lebro immediately reacted. That's right, the magic airship under them was currently flying at 130 kilometers per hour and this magician was quickly approaching, which meant that he was flying even faster than 130 kilometers per hour. This wasn't something that a normal magician could do. Even among great magicians, if they weren't proficient in wind-attributed magic, they might not be able to reach such an exaggerated speed. The most important thing is that he's clearly coming for us. Kandashenko pointed at the magic illusion as he spoke. Lebro looked over and found that the red dot of light was much closer than before. It wasn't far from the center. How far is he from us right now? Lebro asked. He's still 3 kilometers away, but with his performance just now, I feel that he'll catch up to us in less than 5 minutes. Boss, what do we do? Lebro was silent for a bit before giving the order. Keep checking and everyone else prepare to fight. After saying this, Lebro took out the magic communicator and connected to all the magic airships in the team. Lebro, why are you here again? It can't be that you're going back on your word, right? A commander teased. That's no good. Lebro, you're the leader of this operation, how can you go back on your words? Isn't that right, everyone? Right, of course it's right. The others began to shout. Lebro didn't have time to chat with them, so he said in a deep voice, Everyone, there is something strange in the rear. It's determined that there is a magician at least at the great magician realm chasing after us. Everyone, prepare yourselves, I feel that this magician doesn't have good intentions. The magic communicator fell silent before there was a burst of noise. Because the 10 magic airships had been together when they returned, only Lebro's ship had turned on its magic radar. The other magic airships didn't notice this abnormality at all. After a while, the commanders of the other magic airships all sent messages, saying that they had also noticed this abnormality. Lebro looked at another magic illusion and found that the red dot was even closer to the center. It was clearly coming for them, so he immediately gave the order, Everyone, prepare to fight. The enemy this time is at least a high-grade great magician. As soon as his voice fell, Kandashenko called out in surprise. Boss, there is a high-energy magic reaction in the rear. Before Kandashenko could finish, it was like the magic airship had been hit by something as it began to violently shake. Lebro barely stabilized himself, but he was shocked. The magic airship had a magic protection system on, so it should be able to block all 9th grade magic and below. It could even block most of the forbidden spells. But now that the magic airship was hit by this attack, it could be seen just how shocking this attack was. This magician that suddenly caught up, just who was he? Chapter 1092. Archmagus Reduca knit his brows as he looked at the magic airship in the distance that had stabilized after a slight tremble. It continued flying at high speeds like it wasn't affected at all, and his heart sunk. Although the Thunder's Fury he'd just cast was only a spell of the 9th level, the power of this spell had far exceeded that of an ordinary spell of the 9th level due to his special attainments in wind magic and his powerful magic as an archmage. Even if it couldn't compare to the might of a forbidden spell that could destroy the world, it wasn't that far off. But when this powerful spell hit the magic airship, it was completely offset by the halo that appeared around it. In the end, the magic airship only shook a few times in the air, but it didn't suffer any damage at all. This was too incredible. No matter how shocked he was, Archmagus Reduca's hands didn't stop moving. He kept flying at high speeds while spreading his hands, beginning to condense a true forbidden spell. Since a 9th grade spell couldn't pose a threat to the magic airship, he would use a higher level forbidden spell. No matter what, he had to make these magic airships stay. As the Archmagus that the army headquarters had specially invited to protect the rear of the expeditionary army, not being able to protect the warehouse from the surprise attack of the magic airships was already a dereliction of duty and a great shame for him. Now that he had finally caught up with the other side's trace of magic and couldn't stop them, he wouldn't have any face to see anyone in the future. The mana fluctuations in the rear continue to increase. Kandashenko loudly shouted. Anfi Raduka loudly shouted, "It's still continuing. God! The strength of these magic fluctuations definitely surpasses a 9th grade spell." Surpasses a 9th grade spell? Isn't that a forbidden spell? Lebro was surprised. He looked at the red light on the magic radar that was becoming brighter and brighter before grabbing the magic communicator to give the order without any hesitation. "Everyone listen up, the enemy is preparing a forbidden spell, so immediately prepare to dodge. At the same time, raise your magic shields to their highest strength. Rez, Novelai, your 2 airships immediately prepare the magic spatial interference device to the rear." "Yes." Received. Rez and Novelai, the commanders of the other 2 magic airships, replied from the magic communicator. After a while, their voices sounded again. "The Thunder Hawk is ready. The Dawn ship is also ready." "Very good, listen to my orders." After Lebro gave this order, he stared at the magic radar while listening to Kandashenko's nervous report. The magic fluctuations are still increasing. They're over 10,000 exps. It's confirmed to be a forbidden spell. The magic space is changing, the forbidden spell. Rez, Novelai, listen to my countdown. Yes. Understood. Alright, let the countdown begin. 3, 2, 1, release. Magus, 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 the magic, Magus, 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 almost covered the entire sky. But Magus, Magus, Magi, Magus, Magi, Magus, Magus, Magic, Magus, Magic. Moreover, the forbidden spell was almost ready, so he didn't have the energy to worry about anything else. The magic in his body crazily revolved as Archmagus Raduka applied to condense the already formed lightning forbidden spell, Thunder God's Fury, and threw it out. However, as he was about to complete the final step, he suddenly felt the mana space around him distort. As a result, the frightening mana contained within the Thunder God's wrath that he had just condensed was affected and fluctuated abruptly. If it weren't for his superb control over his wind magic and the advanced lightning magic of the wind magic, this accident alone would have caused him to fail in casting the spell. However, because of this, although he had successfully released the Thunder God's Fury, its power was far from what he had expected. It was no longer a perfect Thunder God's Fury. Of course, no matter how it was affected, this Thunder God's Fury was still a lightning forbidden spell that Archmagus Laduca was very confident in. Its power was far from what a normal 9th level spell could compare to. Seeing this strange thick bolt of lightning that almost split the sky in half, Archmagus Raduca's lips curled into a smile. These rats that should have come from the Frestec Chamber of Commerce, they would definitely be turned to dust by the wrath of thunder. But after that, the smile on his face turned into shock. As soon as the bolt of lightning was released, the 10 magic airships in front suddenly released a bright blue light. Then the 10 magic airships suddenly sped up, flying in all directions at the same time. The Thunder God's Fury's bolt of lightning flew past them, not hitting a single magic airship. "Humph, you think you can dodge it like this?" Archmagus Raduca's eyes turned cold. His magic moved and the magic mark he had left in the Thunder God's Fury was activated. The thick bolt of lightning from the Thunder God's Fury exploded in the sky, turning into countless thin bolts of lightning that filled the sky. The magic airships couldn't dodge at all, and each magic airship was hit by countless bolts of lightning. However, the light shield around the magic airships blocked these bolts of lightning. They only swayed a bit in the air, but they didn't suffer any real damage. Archmagus Reduca wasn't surprised by this situation, since the Thunder God's fury he used just now was much stronger than the scattered bolts of lightning, but it still couldn't hurt the magic airships. With a thought, Archmagus Reduca raised his hands and prepared for another attack. "Oh my God! This fellow is actually preparing another forbidden spell!" Kandashenko shouted out. Lebro's face sunk as he confirmed his guesses. This magician that suddenly appeared definitely wasn't a normal great magician. Based on how he could easily release such a terrifying forbidden spell and how he could use it continuously, he was at least a peak 5th grade great magician. He might even be an archmagus that stood at the peak of all magicians. Thinking of this, Lebro didn't dare hesitate as he grabbed the magic communicator again. "Everyone listen to my orders. Immediately activate the 2nd grade power charging device. Remove the speed limit and retreat as fast as you can." This time, the other magic airship commanders on the other side didn't waste words. They just gave a simple response before going back to work. This enemy magician's actions after he appeared were too shocking, so they knew that he wasn't someone easy to deal with. It was very hard to fight him, so of course their first choice was to run as fast as possible. After a while, there was a response from the magic communicator that came from the magic communicator. "Very good. Charles, Chekhov, and Clyde, you three will release the magic spatial interference device. After the magic spatial interference device is released, the magic airships will retreat as fast as possible, understood?" There was another response from the magic communicator before Lebro did a simple countdown again. The 3 magic airships that he named released the magic spatial interference device that they had already prepared. Seeing the strange glows behind the magic airships in front of him, Archmagus Reduca immediately became vigilant. He was certain that when he released the Thunder God's fury, he had been disturbed by these strange things. That was why there were some flaws in the final spell, and it didn't hit the magic airships as he expected. Now that the other side was using the same trick, of course he wouldn't fall for it. Archmagus Reduca sent out a bit of magic to investigate, preparing to prepare ahead of time before anything happened with the magic spatial interference device. But when this bit of magic was sent out, there was a bright light blue glow that came from behind the 10 magic airships in front of him. The 10 magic airships suddenly sped up and instantly left Archmagus Reduca behind, turning into 10 small black dots in the sky. Archmagus Reduca was surprised before reacting. The other side saw that the situation was bad and directly ran. "Humph, in front of me, how could it be that easy to escape?" Archmagus Reduca's expression changed. He released his magic and suddenly disappeared. When he appeared again, he was already 2 kilometers away in the sky, blocking the path of the 10 magic airship. Seeing the 10 magic airships quickly flying over, Archmagus Reduca raised his right hand and a stone wall that was close to 10 meters thick appeared in the air. If the 10 magic airships flew over like this, they would hit the stone wall. At the same time, Archmagus Reduca used his magic again. He gathered the magic elemental energy around him and prepared another forbidden spell. But before he could even prepare half of it, the 10 magic airships were already flying over from the distance. When they were about to hit the stone wall, the 10 magic airships released flames at the same time and exploded on the stone wall. Hong, 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 hong. The 10-meter thick stone wall was blown to pieces by this attack. Then the 10 magic airships charged at the light shield, not planning on slowing down at all. Archmagus Reduca couldn't prepare a forbidden spell at this time, so he could only watch as the 10 magic airships flew away. "How could I let you go like this?" Archmagus Reduca didn't give up as he used the spatial transfer spell to block the 10 magic airship. But this time he didn't have enough time to prepare a forbidden spell. The normal magic attacks couldn't hurt the light shield of the 10 magic airships at all and couldn't affect them at all. So Archmagus Reduca used the spatial transfer spell to block the 10 magic airships again and again, helplessly watching them fly away. After repeating this several times, Archmagus Reduca saw the 10 magic airships fly away again. He also saw a mountain range covered in mahogany that appeared in front of him. He was very clear that this mountain range was the border between the Kingdom of Ruhr and the Canla Empire. If he kept chasing, he would enter the Kingdom of Ruhr. After thinking for a bit, Archmagus Reduca gave a helpless sigh and gave up on chasing. Chapter 1093. When the Canla Empire and the Malar Empire joined forces with over 40 other countries and over 60 well-known organizations to declare war on the New Flyer, no one was optimistic about the prospects of the New Flyer because no one believed that the New Flyer could resist such a terrifying force. Even though the Lampari Kingdom, the Kingdom of Ruhr, the Dela Duchy, and many other countries expressed their support for the New Flyer, this didn't change everyone's opinion. This was because compared to behemoths like the Canla Empire and the Mala Empire, the Lampari Kingdom and the others were only small countries. Their overall strength was far inferior. Of course, because the New Flyer and these other countries possessed a portion of military magic machines with the support of the New Flyer, some people guessed that the two empires wouldn't progress too smoothly after the start of the war and would be counterattacked by these countries. But no one believed that they would be able to resist in the end because the difference in national strength was too great. Even if they competed in consumption, the two empires would definitely exhaust them bit by bit. But when the war between the two sides truly started, everyone discovered that the progress was different from what they had expected. Whether it was the Canla Empire or the Mala Empire, they suffered heavy losses when they invaded the Kingdom of Ruhr from the south and invaded the Dela Duchy from the north. The Malar Empire was still fine. They only fought with the Drake Duchy and the Lampari Kingdom at the border of the Dela Duchy and the Frankish Duchy and were forced to retreat after paying a heavy price. As for the Canla Empire, they suffered heavy losses when they invaded the Kingdom of Ruhr from the south. Just the first step of the invasion of the Kingdom of Ruhr caused the Canla Empire to lose over 40,000 elite. Afterwards, the Expeditionary Army's logistics warehouse was raided by the New Flyer Guards, causing all of their supplies to be destroyed. Afterwards, the Canla Empire's Expeditionary Army was forced to fight a decisive battle against the Kingdom of Ruhr under the leadership of Duke Makaros and the Kingdom of Ruhr Guards and the Kingdom of Ruhr Guards on the Indra Plains to the north of the Kingdom of Ruhr. This battle could be considered the largest-scale battle with the most people participating in the Signs continent in the past few decades. The Canla Empire had invested over 140,000 troops, while the Kingdom of Ruhr Guards and the New Flyer Guards had invested less than 50,000 troops. Under normal circumstances, with such a disparity in numbers, the Kingdom of Ruhr and the New Flyer Guards would be seeking their own deaths if they chose to fight on the plains. But when the battle truly began, the results of the battle shocked the entire continent. In less than a day, the outcome of the battle was decided. In the end, the Canla Empire's Expeditionary Army was completely routed. Their casualties exceeded 100,000 and only 40,000 managed to escape. Perhaps this result was still within the acceptable range. After all, in the history of the Signs, there had been many cases of a few winning against many. But after knowing the losses of the Kingdom of Ruhr Guards and the New Flyer Guards, no one dared to believe such a result. According to the data released after the battle, the Kingdom of Ruhr Guards and the New Flyer Guards had lost less than 3,000 men in this battle. With less than 50,000 men against the Canla Empire's elite army of 140,000, the Kingdom of Ruhr Guards and the Canla Empire only lost less than 3,000 men? Even in the exaggerated war novels that were popular among the commoners in the Signs, it was impossible to compare the losses of both sides. This was because everyone believed that this was simply impossible. But the truth was placed in front of everyone, and they had no choice but to believe it. More importantly, the Kandla Empire had decisively withdrawn their troops from the Kingdom of Ruhr and did not raise any objections to the results announced by the Kingdom of Ruhr. The Kandra Empire army that had been aggressive before, saying that they would destroy all resistance from the Rudsun Kingdom in a single month, fell into a deathly silence and didn't make a single sound. Not long after that, in the beginning of July, the new Flyer Guards disembarked from the southern port of the Duchy of Wales. In less than a week, they completely annihilated the army of the Kingdom of Ruhr and the Kandla Empire that had invaded the Duchy of Wales. Then, they went north and attacked the Kingdom of Ruhr's capital, Ruhr City, and the palace. Half a month later, the Kingdom of Ruhr was completely under the control of the new Flyer. The Kandla Empire's army that had been stationed in the Kingdom of Ruhr after the declaration of war was easily defeated by the counterattack of the new Flyer Guard. The remnants of the army returned to the Kandla Empire. As for the actions of the new Flyer Guards in the Kingdom of Ruhr, the Kandla Empire didn't say anything. At the same time, the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom in the southeast corner of the continent suddenly made their move. In just a month, they had defeated the armies of the 3 surrounding countries and brought those 3 countries under their control. The countries in the southeast corner of the continent that had been opposing the new Flyer with the Kandla Empire instantly lost their voices. The Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom easily controlled the situation in this area. Then it was the end of July. After defeating the Sak Kingdom's resistance, the Lampari Kingdom controlled the situation in the Sak Kingdom. On the 30th of July, they joined forces with the Drake Duchy to attack the Frankish Kingdom. The Frankish Kingdom's army fought back with the 100,000 army sent by the Mala Empire, but they were defeated again and again before finally being routed. In the end, the Frankish Kingdom's army was almost completely destroyed, and less than 40,000 of the 100,000 army of the Mala Empire returned to the Mala Empire. On the 23rd of August, the Lampari Kingdom and the Drake Duchy attacked the Frankish Kingdom's capital. The Frankish Kingdom's king and royal palace were destroyed in the flames of war, and the Frankish Kingdom was declared dead. On the 10th of September, the Sak Kingdom's king announced that he had surrendered to the Lampari Kingdom. At this point, the Sak Kingdom had become part of the Lampari Kingdom's territory, and the Sak Kingdom had been destroyed. On the 27th of September, the Drake Duchy and the Lampari Kingdom signed an agreement, splitting the Frankish Kingdom's territory in half. The 170,000 square kilometers of land to the west that was connected to the Drake Duchy would belong to the Drake Duchy, and the 230,000 square kilometers of land to the east that was connected to the Mala Empire would belong to the Lampari Kingdom. After this agreement was announced, the people who knew about it were a bit surprised. There was no problem with the Drake Duchy's half of the Frankish Kingdom's territory because it was connected to the Drake Duchy, so they could expand the Drake Duchy's territory. But the Lampari Kingdom's half of the Frankish Kingdom's territory was very problematic. It could be seen from the map that this half of the land was connected to the Mala Empire to the north, the Kandla Empire to the east, the west and southwest were connected to the Drake Duchy's half of the land, and the south was connected to 2 small duchies. In short, there wasn't a single bit of land that was connected to the Lampari Kingdom. Since it was like this, why did the Lampari Kingdom want this half of the land? Without a border, it would be very inconvenient to control it. But not long after, the questions in people's hearts were answered. On the 17th day of the 10th month, the 2 neighboring small duchies to the south announced that they would join the Lampari Kingdom. Like this, if one looked at the map, they would find that because the Lampari Kingdom's northeast side was connected to one of the small duchies, this piece of land would be connected to the Lampari Kingdom. For this result, most people could only express that it was unexpected, but also reasonable. If it was anyone else, even the dukes of the 2 small duchies, they would only have this choice. If they didn't take the initiative to surrender, Would they wait for the Lampari kingdom's army to attack them? Before, these two small duchies were under the protection of the Canla Empire, so they weren't worried about the Lampari kingdom and the Frankish kingdom having thoughts about them. But now that they had gone through a war that no one could understand, the Lampari kingdom had become extremely powerful, while the Canla Empire had fallen into silence. In this situation, how could these two small duchies not know what choice to make? Like this, in less than half a year, the situation in the southwest corner of the Signs continent had undergone a heaven-shaking change. Not to mention the small duchies, the Sac kingdom and the Frankish kingdom that were considered powerful kingdoms in the southwest corner of the continent had actually been destroyed, which was very surprising. Correspondingly, the Lampari kingdom had become the biggest winner. After several months of fighting, the Lampari kingdom had completely swallowed the Sac kingdom. Adding in the 240,000 square kilometers of land they had received from the Frankish kingdom, the Lampari kingdom's current territory had reached a shocking 1.5 million square kilometers. This kind of area, when placed in the signs, it could be considered the largest country other than the two empires. The second biggest winner was the Drake Duchy. This small duchy that was sandwiched between the Lampari kingdom, the Sac kingdom, and the Frankish kingdom, with a total area of less than 10,000 square kilometers and a population of less than 100,000, had now swallowed 170,000 square kilometers of land that belonged to the Frankish kingdom, as well as a total of close to 1 million people. This inevitably raised doubts in people's hearts. Did the Drake Duchy really have such a big appetite to eat these things? Chapter 1094. A magic airship slowly fell down from the sky. As soon as it landed, Princess Caroline. Oh no, Duke Caroline, who had already taken over the position of Duke, led a group of subordinates to greet him. The door of the magic airship opened and Sue-E came out. Hey, dear Sue-E, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Duke Caroline came over and gave Sue-E a big hug. Then she didn't care about the gazes of the people around them as she pouted her lips and moved closer to Sue-E's face. Sue-E quickly turned his face and avoided her lip. He only let her kiss his face before kissing her cheek, which could be considered an intimate gesture. Hey, Caroline, you're someone who's getting married next month. How can you still be this bold? Sue-E said in a soft voice beside Duke Caroline's ear. Bold? Am I? Duke Caroline gave a charming laugh. She let out a soft breath that tickled Sue-Ye's ear. If you agree now, I'll immediately cancel this marriage. What do you think? Nonsense. Sue-E softly reprimanded. He let go of his hands and softly pushed Duke Caroline away before giving a cough and saying with a serious look, Is everything prepared? Duke Caroline gave a shrug. I don't have much to prepare, I'm just waiting for the people you send. Sue-E nodded. He waved his hand behind him, and a group of people wearing the uniform of the new flyer came out of the magic airship. These are the people in charge of the initial survey that came with me. Come, let me introduce them. This is the person in charge of the Door City's Magic Defense Project, Gustalo. A tall middle-aged human man came forward and gave a bow to Duke Caroline. Greetings to your Excellency. Grand Duke Caroline looked at him from head to toe and extended her hand with a smile. Since Chairman Sue sent you here, I have full trust in you. Supervisor Gustalo, I'll leave the defense of Door City to you. Gustalo hesitated for a moment, before taking Grand Duke Caroline's outstretched hand and gently kissing it. He respectfully replied, I will serve you wholeheartedly. Very good. Grand Duke Caroline's eyes darted around. She swept her gaze over the other new flyer employees behind Sue-E and made an inviting gesture. I've already set up a banquet in the city. Chairman Sue and everyone else, please follow me. Sue-E shook his head, glanced at Gustav and said, Time is of the essence, they don't have that much time to attend the banquet. Gustalo, you should seize the time to investigate the situation of the city walls and try to come up with some rough data by today. The R&D center is still waiting. Yes. Gustalo immediately nodded, then turned to Grand Duke Caroline and said, Your Excellency, please send some people who are familiar with Door City to work with us. Grand Duke Caroline was a little dazed. There's no need to be in such a hurry, right? You came from so far away, you should at least have a meal and get used to it. No need, we don't have that much time. We don't know when the next wave of attack from the Mala Empire will come. And as long as they come, it will be a very fierce wave of attack. You don't want the precious land that you have just obtained to be snatched back by the Mala Empire in the blink of an eye, right? Sui said. Grand Duke Caroline sighed softly. She waved her hand behind her, and the two officials of the Drake Duchy who came with her to welcome them quickly walked over. Supervisor Gustalo, these are the two officials who are in charge of the overall defense of Door City. If you have any questions, you can ask them. Okay. Supervisor Gustalo no longer stood on ceremony and directly went to talk to the two officials. Sui, I find it very strange a lot of times. How did you train the employees of your Chamber of Commerce to be like this? It's as if they only have work in their eyes and nothing else. Grand Duke Caroline looked at Gustalo and the other group of new flyer employees who were discussing enthusiastically and couldn't help but sigh. Sui smiled and said, It's not as exaggerated as you say. The employees of our Chamber of Commerce are very playful when they are free, but they have always been very serious when working. This is my strict requirement for them. Of course, they can accept and consciously do this mainly because they feel a sense of accomplishment in their work. Sense of accomplishment? Grand Duke Caroline frowned slightly. What kind of sense of accomplishment? Think about it. Because of their efforts, they can make Door City, an inconspicuous small city, able to withstand the attack of the huge Mala Empire. Don't tell me they don't feel a sense of accomplishment? Grand Duke Caroline was silent for a moment and asked, Sui, answer me seriously. After the city's system magic defense system is built, can it really make Door City so stable that it can withstand the attack of the Mala Empire's army? The city's defense has never been solved by just relying on a system. But I can tell you that as long as there are no problems in other aspects of Door City, this defense system is enough to make Door City last for at least a month without falling, no matter how many troops the Mala Empire sends. Sui replied seriously. What if the Mala Empire sends out magisters? Grand Duke Caroline asked again. Magisters? Sui laughed. If the Mala Empire is willing to risk the taboo of all magicians on the continent and send out magisters to attack other countries, then they have already lost half of the battle. As for the magisters themselves, I admit that the individual ability of a magister is very strong, but you have to remember that the role of a single person in a war is very limited. Even if the Mala Empire really sends out magisters, they can't do anything to this magic defense system that our Chamber of Commerce has painstakingly built after a long period of research and development. Grand Duke Caroline looked at Sui doubtfully. She didn't understand why he was so confident. Magisters had always been the top fighting force on the continent. In the history of the signs, as long as one side had more great magicians, it was enough to determine the outcome of the battle. Once a magister appeared, it was enough to quickly tip the scales of victory towards the side with the magisters. The reason why the Mala Empire and the Kanla Empire were able to stand tall on the signs for so many years was not only because they maintained absolute strength most of the time, but also because they had magisters to hold the fort when they were in decline. This had a lot to do with the fact that other countries couldn't truly defeat them. When the Sorcerers' Guild was established, it was a tradition that magisters couldn't participate in invading other countries. Although this ensured that the two empires couldn't easily invade other countries, it also allowed the two empires to stand tall. However, this tradition was only an unwritten agreement. If the Malar Empire really broke this tradition, other than the Canla Empire and the Mana Magic Kingdom, which had the third largest number of magisters, no other countries or forces on the continent were qualified to restrain them. This time, the Canla Empire and the Mala Empire had joined forces, which was extremely rare. They even joined forces with the Mana Magic Kingdom and other countries to declare war on the new flyer. What worried the new flyer the most was that the other side would dispatch magisters to participate in the invasion. Although the other side didn't intend to break this tradition so far, no one could guarantee that they wouldn't do so. After all, even something as impossible as the two empires joining forces had happened. It wasn't completely impossible for something else to happen. However, now that Sui said to Grand Duke Caroline that the role of magisters in war was very limited, it didn't matter even if the Mala Empire dispatched magisters. This made Grand Duke Caroline unable to understand. I'll tell you the truth, Caroline. The final goal of the city defense system that our Chamber of Commerce developed is actually to prevent the appearance of magisters. As for any conventional army of the two empires, even if it doesn't include our new flyer guards, your Della Duchy's army wouldn't be afraid, right? Yes. Grand Duke Caroline nodded. When the Drake Duchy joined forces with the Lampari Kingdom to fight against the Mala Empire and the Frankish Kingdom, the other side didn't have any ability to fight back. With the huge difference in fighting strength between the two sides, the so-called difference in military strength was simply insignificant. In fact, even if they didn't join forces with the Lampari Kingdom, with just the Drake Duchy's army, not to mention the Malar Empire's regular army, there wouldn't be any pressure when facing the Frankish Kingdom's army. So, the reason why I'm helping you build this city defense system in Dor City, which is not far from the Malar Empire's border, is to defend against the possible attack of the Mala Empire and even the appearance of magisters. Sui continued. Think about it, if even magisters can't take down this city, what do you think the Mala Empire will think? What would the other countries on the continent think? Grand Duke Caroline thought for a bit before revealing a smile. If even magisters can't do anything to us, it means that this land will truly fall into the hands of our Drake Duchy and no one will be able to take it away. That's right. At that time, you'll no longer be the Grand Duke of the Drake Duchy, but rather the Queen of the Drake Kingdom. Sui smiled. Chapter 1095. Dol City's location was very strange. This city originally belonged to the Frankish Kingdom and was located to the north of the Frankish Kingdom, close to the border between the Frankish Kingdom and the Malar Empire. This was because the Frankish Kingdom and the Marlow Empire were separated by a mountain range to the north. Dol City was at the exit of a valley that was different in number, so it could be considered a choke point that connected the Frankish Kingdom and the Marlow Empire. Before, the Frankish Kingdom and the Mala Empire had a good relationship and could be considered allies, so Dol City was only a transportation hub. But now that the Frankish Kingdom was destroyed, the area where Dol City was located was divided under the name of the Drake Duchy. Dol City had changed and its strategic position was very clear. If the Malar Empire wanted to invade again, Dol City was a point that couldn't be ignored. So Sui cooperated with the Drake Duchy this time and prepared to build a complete city defense system for the Drake Duchy. With this, they could resist the invasion of the Mala Empire. Dol City became the first choice. This system was like what Sui said. The goal of developing this system was to provide a complete defense system based on military magic machines for the entire city. With this, they could easily resist the attack of the Mala Empire's army. The final goal was that even if the other side sent out Archmagi, they could still complete the defense and make Dol City as solid as soup. But this system had a very serious problem, and that was that the cost of production was too high. Just Dol City alone wasn't that big. If they wanted to set up this system, according to New Flyer's budget, they would need to invest at least 8 million gold coins. So even if New Flyer made a move, they wouldn't be able to set up this system in all the cities controlled by the Drake Duchy. They could only choose a few cities to set up. Dole City was only one of them. Afterwards, they would set up this system in the cities near the Mala Empire in the north of the Drake Duchy, completely sealing off the route that the Mala Empire could use to invade the Drake Duchy. For this, the Drake Duchy estimated that the total investment would reach 70 million gold coins. Although the Drake Duchy had been developing the magic machine industry over the years, guaranteeing their financial income, they couldn't take out such a large investment. Thus, according to the agreement between the two sides, the Drake Duchy would sell a third of the 170,000 square kilometers of the Frankish kingdom's mineral resources to the New Flyer. They would develop the remaining mineral resources with the New Flyer as payment. As this agreement involved too many mineral resources, there were even some discordant voices within the Della Duchy. They claimed that Grand Duchess Caroline was simply using the mineral resources that she had obtained with great difficulty to please the New Flyer. It could even be said that she was a traitor. But from a practical point of view, with the Drake Duchy's current capabilities, it was impossible for them to effectively develop these mineral resources. On the other hand, if they were handed over to New Flyer, they would be able to make full use of them. The most important thing was that the Drake Duchy couldn't do without the New Flyer. If they lost the support of the New Flyer, the Drake Duchy wouldn't have been able to develop to this point and wouldn't have been able to resist a giant like the Malar Empire. So compared to the voices of doubt and opposition, the voices of support for Grand Duchess Caroline were the most numerous in the Drake Duchy. This time, the Drake Duchy had annexed 170,000 square kilometers of the Frankish kingdom's land, allowing the Drake Duchy's territory to expand by close to 20 times. It could be said that this was the greatest achievement the Drake Duchy had made in the 300 years since its establishment. It was an achievement that even the previous Grand Dukes didn't dare imagine. With the support of this achievement, there was no need to doubt Grand Duchess Caroline's prestige. Because of this, there were many nobles in the Drake Duchy that wanted Grand Duchess Caroline to be crowned king, but they were all rejected by Grand Duchess Caroline. How could I not understand the thoughts of these fellows? Grand Duchess Caroline's beautiful face revealed a smile of disdain. They are just hoping that after I am crowned king, they will redistribute the land. Humph, these fellows are all staring fixedly at this new piece of land that they've just obtained. These ignorant fellows must be thinking about getting a bigger piece of land right now. This is very normal, after all, they are nobles. Obtaining more land is a tradition of nobles and also represents the glory of nobles. Sui said with a smile. Che, even if I give them a large piece of land, do they have the ability to defend it? The ridicule on Grand Duchess Caroline's face became deeper. Just like you. Sui, you seem to have the title of Count in the Principality of Constantine, right? Does the amount of land you have under your name have any effect on you? Could it be that people will look down on you because your land isn't big enough? I've always emphasized that my identity is a merchant. Whether it's a noble or a magician, it's just a side effect. Sui shrugged and said with a relaxed expression, There's no point in comparing the size of your territory with me. You might as well compare the amount of money you earn every year. Amount of money you earn every year? Grand Duchess Caroline looked Sui up and down and narrowed her eyes slightly. Sui, can you tell me how much money your New Flyer makes in a year? Sui immediately laughed in spite of himself. This isn't some shameful secret, you don't need to use this kind of tone to ask. To tell you the truth, our Chamber of Commerce made about 150 million gold coins last year. 150 million gold coins. Grand Duchess Caroline immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Oh my God! I always knew that your Chamber of Commerce made a lot of money, but I never thought that it would be this much. Our duchy's annual revenue doesn't even reach 20 million gold coins. That was when you were still a small duchy. Now that you've obtained such a large piece of territory, as long as you operate it well, I think that in a few years your annual revenue will easily surpass ours. Sui smiled. Also, I need to tell you something else, and that is that our Chamber of Commerce's income report at the end of this year is going to be very ugly. That's not strange. After all, your new Flyers Guards also directly participated in the war this year. War is something that costs a lot of money. If it wasn't for the military magic machines that you produced having an absolute advantage in battle strength, then the war would have dragged on for a long time. No matter if it was our duchy or your Chamber of Commerce, we would definitely have been dragged down by the Mala Empire and the Kanla Empire. You're right, so we can't drag it out. We have to end this war in the shortest time possible. Sui said with a serious expression. How do we do that? Grand Duchess Carolyn frowned. The Malar Empire and the Kanla Empire's foundations are too deep. They also have so many mages holding the fort. When we face them, we can only be completely passive. When we end the war is completely up to them. That's not necessarily true. As long as we hurt them and let them know that continuing the war will only cause them more harm, they'll take the initiative to end the war. Sui revealed a dangerous smile. First, I need to tell them that mages aren't that safe. Grand Duchess Carolyn looked at Sui in confusion. In the past few years of interaction, Sui had shown more than once that he didn't care about mages, or even disdain them. This made her feel very strange. It was reasonable to say that Sui was already a mage, so he should know better than anyone how terrifying a mage's abilities were. Although the military magic machines developed by New Flyer were also powerful, the most terrifying thing about mages was that they were far more flexible than military magic machines. It was very difficult to truly restrict them. Moreover, mages didn't have to expend a lot of effort to use forbidden magic like great mages. Once a mage was allowed to use their full strength, the destructive power they caused was abnormally terrifying. If it was just defense, then perhaps there was still a way. However, if they wanted to counterattack, then it would be a huge headache due to the destructive power of mages. This was also why Grand Duchess Carolyn believed that even though they'd easily defeated the regular armies of the Kanla Empire, the Malar Empire, and the other countries, they were still at an absolute disadvantage in the overall situation. With the military magic machines produced by New Flyer, they could easily defend against the attacks of the two empires, but it was basically impossible for them to counterattack. Not to mention mages, just the foundations of both sides were too far apart. Our best choice now should be to consolidate our current gains and absorb them properly, then increase our own strength. Only then will we have the capital to truly contend against the two empires. I don't think it's a good choice to act rashly. Grand Duchess Carolyn couldn't help but advise when she heard the trace of madness in Sui's words. This is your choice as the ruler of a country, it's not wrong. However, Sui smiled and patted her shoulder. Have you ever thought of a question? What is the reason why we're able to easily defeat the two empires on the battlefield? Of course it's because of the military magic machines provided by your Chamber of Commerce. What else could it be? Grand Duchess Carolyn asked in puzzlement. That's right, but it's not completely accurate. Sui shook his head lightly. In fact, in the many battles we've had with the two empires this time, we've discovered that the two empires have done a certain amount of research on military magic machines, and many of them have been put into practical use. The reason why we're able to easily defeat them is because of the technological advantage our Chamber of Commerce has in military magic machines. Have you ever thought about what would happen if our Chamber of Commerce loses our technological advantage over time? Grand Duchess Carolyn's expression changed slightly. It can't be. Your Chamber of Commerce's military magic machines are clearly so much stronger than theirs. How could they possibly catch up? There's nothing impossible in this world. That's why we have to take advantage of the fact that they're still at an absolute disadvantage in this area to fight for enough benefits for ourselves. Don't tell me you plan to. Carolyn looked at Sue-E in bewilderment. Sue-E smiled and patted her shoulder again. Wait for my good news. Chapter 1096. When he heard the news of an enemy invasion from his subordinate, Marrow City Lord Dean Dempsey was stunned. Count Dempsey almost couldn't believe his ears. Enemy invasion? As the current patriarch of the Dempsey family, Dean Dempsey was stunned. This was the first time he had heard of the word enemy since he took over the position of Marrow City's city lord 26 years ago. Even before the Dempsey family had infested this piece of land for more than 400 years, there had never been an enemy invasion of Marrow City. Marrow City was the largest city near the border of the Canla Empire's southwest province. It was known as the jewel of the southwest province's border. Someone actually dared to recklessly invade such a high-profile city? Or to put it more bluntly, someone actually had the guts to invade the Canla Empire's territory? In the 1,000 years of Canla Empire's history, other than a few rare periods of decline, other than the Mala Empire, which other country in the signs dared to invade the Canla Empire like this? They were simply courting death. Where did the enemy come from? Did you find out? Also, what are the border guards doing? They actually didn't stop those fellows? Count Dempsey asked with a gloomy face as he walked out, preparing to issue orders. He wasn't a useless noble city lord and naturally understood that since the enemy dared to invade Marrow City, they at least had a certain amount of confidence in their own strength. If he didn't deal with it properly, even if Marrow City didn't fall, just the little bit of damage that Marrow City suffered from the flames of war was something he couldn't accept. Hearing his question, the subordinate who came to report had an extremely ugly expression. After swallowing a mouthful of saliva, he replied with a bitter smile, "We found out. According to the information sent back by the spies, the enemy came from the southwest and hung the flag of New Flyer." Count Dempsey's footsteps suddenly stopped, his eyes wide open and his face full of shock. New Flyer? Are you kidding me? Why is it them? No, where did they get the guts to invade our Canla Empire? They're just a merchant guild. The subordinate had a bitter smile. He was also filled with doubts about this question, so how could he wait for Count Dempsey to answer it? No! Count Dempsey suddenly trembled as he suddenly thought of the rumors about the New Flyer in the circle of the Empire's nobles. Half a year ago, most nobles of the Empire's nobles were familiar with the New Flyer and the various household magic machines that made their lives. When the nobles gathered to discuss the Frestec Chamber of Commerce, most of them would talk about the high-grade magic sedans the Frestec Chamber of Commerce produced. They would brag that they could buy a custom magic sedan from the Frestec Chamber of Commerce. As for the military strength of the New Flyer, although the nobles of the Canla Empire had heard about it, most of them only knew that the New Flyer made some powerful military magic machines that were very useful on the battlefield. As for how useful and strong these military magic machines were, other than the nobles of the army headquarters, there weren't many people who knew. But now that half a year had passed, in the war that the Canla Empire had invaded the Kingdom of Ruhr, the New Flyer had truly displayed its unparalleled strength. The New Flyer's guards had directly caused the Canla Empire's army of 180,000 to be completely routed in less than 2 months. In the end, the invasion was declared a failure and they helplessly returned to their country. After that, the New Flyer stirred up storms in other parts of the signs, but the Empire had always remained silent and never made a sound. This allowed all the nobles of the Empire to recognize a fact. It was that the Empire's army headquarters had admitted that they didn't have the ability to defeat the Frestec Chamber of Commerce, so they remained silent in front of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce. So all the nobles of the Canla Empire learned of the strength of the New Flyer for the first time. When they discussed the new flyer, most of them focused on the strange military magic machines that the new flyer made. Although Count Dempsey was the lord of a remote territory in the southwest province of the empire, he was still a noble in the end, so he was very sensitive to this news. So he had long since learned of the military strength of the new flyer from various sources, but he had never thought that there would be a day when he would actually face the powerful strength of the new flyer. In the end, the new flyer was only a merchant company. No matter how powerful its military strength was, no matter how unstoppable its guards were, how could it possibly invade the Canla Empire? Count Dempsey's heart was filled with doubts, but now wasn't the time to be doubtful. He frowned and thought seriously for a while, then waved his hand at his subordinate, indicating for him to come closer. Immediately send someone to ask for help from the governor's office. His subordinate was startled. Ask for help? Marrow City was the most important city on the southwest border of the Canla Empire. It had 30,000 regular soldiers of the Empire as guards, and it had also recently been equipped with many military magic machines developed by the military headquarters. In terms of defensive strength, it could be called the strongest city in the southwest province aside from the governor's office. Why did the Lord City Lord immediately ask for help when he heard that the enemy was the new flyer? Although it was said that the new flyer's guards were strong, it shouldn't be that strong, right? Seeing that his subordinate was still in a daze, Count Dempsey glared at him and angrily roared, "What are you in a daze for? Why aren't you going?" His subordinate was surprised, but he quickly replied before turning to leave. Count Dempsey didn't stop at all as he left the city lord's manor. He took the magic sedan that he had just bought 4 months ago and quickly headed to the garrison camp outside the city. However, before he even reached the city gates, he suddenly heard several shocking explosions outside the city. It shook his magic sedan and made his scalp turn numb. Count Dempsey raised his head in shock and saw that the sky outside the city had already been dyed red by the dazzling flames. It was as though even the clouds had been burned. After being stunned for 2 seconds, Count Dempsey suddenly trembled and instantly reacted. The direction the flames came from, wasn't it the direction of the garrison camp outside the city? Count Dempsey hurriedly opened the door and rushed up the city wall beside the city gate like a madman. He raised his eyes and looked into the distance. 3 kilometers outside the city, it was the camp of the 30,000 regular army stationed near Marrow City. Now, looking from afar, the camp was completely surrounded by flames. Only the thunderous sounds of explosions and faint shouts could be heard from afar. Count Dempsey was stunned for a while before grabbing the Marrow City garrison officer who had rushed over after hearing the news. Immediately send people over to see the situation as soon as possible. Do you understand? The garrison officer's fat face was covered in cold sweat. He quickly nodded and turned to arrange people. Count Dempsey turned to look in the direction of the distant camp and his heart filled with a chill. Although he had already heard that the new flyer only had around 20,000 guards, he didn't doubt that with the strength of the new flyer guards, they could easily take care of the 30,000 soldiers. What really made his heart turn cold was that when he received the news of the new flyer's invasion, the new flyer had already arrived at Marrow City in the blink of an eye. They had even come into contact with Marrow City's greatest reliance. This kind of speed was simply unheard of. He could instantly tell that before the Governor Manor sent reinforcements, the other side would have already taken care of the garrison. If they came to attack Marrow City, what would he use to stop them? Perhaps it was in response to Count Dempsey's guess, but after a few minutes, there was a group of strange-looking magic cars that came out of the camp covered in flames and smoke, quickly heading towards Marrow City. Looking at it, this team was made up of several hundred magic cars, but with the campsite behind them that was covered in flames, it made people feel like they were demons that had charged out of hell, making people terrified. Count Dempsey took the binoculars from the garrison officer and saw the flags flying above the magic cars. It was the famous Shinfei flag of the new flyer with half a wing. It really is those fellows. Count Dempsey gritted his teeth as his face filled with uncertainty. The 30,000 soldiers outside the city couldn't be counted on. Marrow City only had 5,000 soldiers and 2,000 guards from the City Lord Manor, so there were only 7,000 soldiers left. Although there were some homemade magic cannons from the army headquarters on the city walls, how could these imitations of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's magic cannons compare to the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's genuine goods? However, as the Marrow City's city lord, he couldn't give up on resisting. Otherwise, if the army headquarters investigated him in the future, just based on this, he would be stripped of his noble status and would even spend the rest of his life in prison. Damn! No matter what, this is still our Dempsey family's territory. How could we give it up this easily? Count Dempus fiercely cursed in his heart. He turned to the city guard beside him and ordered in a deep voice, "Close all city gates and prepare to defend." The guard officer looked at the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's magic cars flying the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's flag in a panic. He thought that even the 30,000 soldiers couldn't stop the attack of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce, so with just the few thousand guards, could they stop them? What are you in a daze for? Count Dempsey kicked the garrison officer's butt. Let me tell you, if you're afraid to fight, do you believe that I won't cut you down right now? The garrison officer's expression turned cold, and he quickly took back his expression. He gave a salute to Count Dempsey before preparing to defend the city. But when he turned and before he could take 2 steps, he heard the whistles of his subordinates in the distance. Turning to look, he found several flames flying out of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's formation in the distance. They instantly crossed 2 kilometers and hit the high walls of Meow City. Hong, 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 hong. Countless explosions sounded in the ears of Count Dempsey and the garrison officer. Then they were shocked to find that the city walls had collapsed. Chapter 1097. Count Dempus, you are a smart person, I'm very happy. Captain Hart's tall body was standing in front of Count Dempus, who wasn't even 1.70 meters tall. He was like a mountain looking down on him, filled with pressure. Because of your wise decision, the citizens of Marrow City won't suffer any more losses from the flames of war. They should thank you for your wise decision as the city lord. I also represent Sir Chairman in praising your correct decision. Before we set off, Sir Chairman had emphasized that he hoped that we could reduce the number of people, especially the number of casualties among the citizens. Now that you have chosen to open the gates and surrender, we are all satisfied. This is very good. Count Dempus had no expressions on his face, but he was secretly gritting his teeth. Looking at Captain Hart, he wished that he could bite this fellow to death. If possible, who would want to open the gates and surrender? However, as soon as New Flyer appeared, it completely exceeded everyone's expectations. With a wild bombardment, they actually destroyed an entire wall of Marrow City's west gate. God above, Beautiful City was the most important city on the southwest border of the empire, so the city walls had been specially built by the Kandra Empire's army headquarters. Adding in the hundreds of years of careful operation by the Dempus family, it was now 13 meters tall. The thickest part was close to 10 meters and the thinnest part was over 5 meters. It was an exaggerated city wall that was over 10 meters tall. Because of these walls, Marrow City was known as one of the top 10 cities in the signs that were hard to capture. In the end, this city wall that could make all the enemies sigh couldn't even last a minute under New Flyer's attack before it was destroyed. Along with the collapse of the city wall, Count Dempus and all the guards of Marrow City lost their confidence. Even this exaggerated city wall couldn't stop the magic cannons of New Flyer's guards. How could Marrow City defend against New Flyer's fierce attacks? Therefore, Count Dempus only pondered for less than 2 minutes before straightforwardly deciding to open the city gates and surrender. Of course, now that the entire western wall of Marrow City had been blown up by the new Flyers guards, what was the point of not opening the city gates? As for what Captain Hart had said, surrendering so readily would allow the citizens of Marrow City to avoid the baptism of gunfire. Although Count Dempus had considered this, the main reason why he had surrendered so readily was because the new Flyer guards had displayed a terrifying might that far exceeded what Marrow City's guards could withstand. It had even exceeded Count Dempus' imagination. Even if the Empire's military came to investigate the situation, they wouldn't be able to find fault with him when they saw the collapsed wall outside. Enough. Count Dempus, withdraw all the garrison troops into the city. After that, do what you need to do. Don't worry about us. Captain Hart suddenly waved his hand and said. Count Dempus was startled. What do you mean by, do what you're supposed to do? Could it be that the current situation wasn't that Marrow City had already been conquered by the new Flyer guards and was under their control? Why did it sound like they weren't planning on doing anything based on Captain Hart's words? Could it be that Marrow City would remain the same? We'll take over Marrow City's defenses, as for the rest. We're not interested. Captain Hart could see Count Dempus' doubt and explained, We're only here to take over Marrow City. This is the only mission Sir Chairman gave us. As for the other things, we'll consider them in the future. Count Dempus thought about it and felt that this was reasonable. After all, the new Flyer guards were only responsible for military operations. As for how to arrange things after taking over Marrow City, that was something for the other departments of the new Flyer guards to consider. Soldiers like them naturally didn't need to care. But Count Dempus sneered and looked straight at Captain Hart with a trace of disdain. Do you really think you can take over our Marrow City forever? I admit that your new Flyer guards are very powerful, but if your chairman Su thinks that you can really take over our Marrow City with just a few thousand people, then you're too naive. Is that so? Captain Hart glanced at Count Dempus and laughed before waving his hand. A few new Flyer guards came up and took Count Dempus away. Captain, I think it's better to get rid of this guy if it's safer. I'm worried that he'll secretly incite the people in the city to rebel. That would be troublesome. Vice Captain Newton of the new Flyer guards leaned over and whispered. No. Captain Hart shook his head. According to our intelligence, Marrow City is the territory of the Dempus family. The Dempus family's influence here is deeply rooted. If we imprison him, then others will have some misgivings. If we really kill him, then it will instead cause a lot of trouble. Newton thought about it and felt that it was a good idea, so he said, Then we should at least think of a way to control him, right? Of course. The few elven lads in the squad have already made preparations. They guarantee that he won't be able to do anything. Mind control. Nunes immediately laughed. Seeing that Captain Hart had already made all the necessary arrangements, he relaxed and began to observe the undamaged city wall on the north side of Marrow City. Captain, do you think we'll be able to finish setting things up before the Canla Empire's reinforcements arrive? I don't know. Captain Hart shrugged. No one knows when the Canla Empire's reinforcements will arrive. However, what we can be sure of is that as long as they come within 50 kilometers of Marrow City, we'll immediately discover them. Since the reconnaissance airship squad hasn't sent any information, it means that the reinforcements haven't arrived yet. No matter what, let's hurry up. Captain Hart glanced at Newton and frowned. I say, Newton, you're not a brat who hasn't seen blood before. Why do you seem so nervous this time? Newton scratched his head in embarrassment. When I think about how we're invading the Canla Empire, I can't help but feel a little nervous. Captain, think about it. This is the Canla Empire. In the history of the continent, other than the Mala Empire, no one else has dared to invade the Canla Empire, right? Captain Hart curled his lips in disdain. Aren't we already here? Sir President has said countless times that the Canla Empire and the Mala Empire are just paper tigers that look powerful. In reality, the power they hold is far behind this era. However, they still don't realize it and think that they're very strong. When we were in the Kingdom of Ruhr, we fought with the Kanla Empire's army many times. It's not like you didn't see the difference between us. What are you afraid of? I'm not afraid, I'm just worried. Newton licked his lips, looking somewhat worried. The Kanla Empire is the most powerful empire on this continent. We're just a chamber of commerce, yet we've come to challenge the Kanla Empire. Hearing this, Captain Hart's expression suddenly turned solemn. He looked at Newton with a sunken face and said sternly, "Newton, if you're afraid, you can go back now." Newton hurriedly waved his hands. No, no, no. Captain, you've misunderstood. I'm really not afraid. It's just that I'm not that confident. Look, we've only brought 5,000 people this time. The Kanla Empire can casually send 50,000 or even 500,000 people. I feel that it's not that appropriate. Captain Hart harumphed coldly and waved his hands. He said in a deep voice, "Sir President has already repeated this countless times. It's no longer an era where numbers can decide everything. Why don't you understand?" Of course, I don't think that Sir President is wrong. It's just that I'm not confident enough. Seeing Newton's troubled expression, Captain Hart sighed inwardly and shook his head helplessly. If even Newton, a high-ranking officer of the Guards, was like this, then there must be a lot of people in the Guards who were thinking the same way. It seemed that it was just as Sir President had said in a private conversation with Captain Hart before they set off. Even though countless actual battles had proven that the Shinfei Chamber of Commerce's military magic machineries had far surpassed this era, far surpassing traditional warfare. It had even broken the traditional concept of using military strength to decide victory and defeat. However, there were still countless people on this continent who still held onto those traditional concepts. Thus, they didn't have enough confidence in the new flyer. That's why the goal of our operation this time isn't to occupy the entire Kanla Empire. That's unrealistic. With the current strength of our Chamber of Commerce, even if we can wipe out all the armies of the Kanla Empire and defeat all the opposing forces, it's impossible for us to truly control the entire Kanla Empire. This is determined by the disparity in scale between the two sides. Captain Hart recalled what Sue-Yi had said at that time and couldn't help but nod inwardly. Sir President's mind was very clear. He definitely wasn't blinded by the numerous victories that the new Flyer Guards had participated in. Our true goal is to shatter the traditional concepts in everyone's hearts. We'll make them realize that the current era has truly changed. We'll make them truly accept the changes that the magic machine industry has brought to this world. We'll make them accept that our new flyer is leading the development of this era. In order to achieve this goal, we'll have to shatter the most powerful monster in everyone's hearts. That is, the Kanla Empire. As for how to shatter it, we'll have to do it bit by bit through this operation. The first step is to shatter something that represents invincibility in everyone's hearts. Chapter 1098. Even if the Southwest Province's Governor Manor had reacted quickly enough, sending reinforcements to beautiful Gauze City as soon as they received the news, they were limited by the speed of communication. When the reinforcements arrived outside beautiful Gauze City, it was already 4 days after the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's guards had taken beautiful Gauze City. This batch of reinforcements was a mix of 3 regiments that had been stationed in the Southwest Province for a long time. There were over 50,000 soldiers, so it could be seen how important this invasion was to the Southwest Province's Governor Manor. The reason why the 50,000 soldiers were able to rush here from the Southwest Province's provincial capital, which was more than 300 kilometers away from Meluo City, was also because they had received strict orders from the governor's office to take back Meluo City from the enemy as soon as possible. After all, the Kanla Empire hadn't been invaded by enemies other than the Malar Empire in several hundred years. There had even been a case of a city being broken through. Now that such a serious case had occurred in the Southwest Province, the Southwest Province's Governor Manor was under a very heavy pressure. However, when the 50,000 reinforcements arrived outside Marrow City, they couldn't even approach the city walls. They were forced to stop 3 kilometers away from the city walls by the incomparably dense cannon fire, not being able to move forward at all. What kind of fucking battle is this? The commander of the reinforcements, Marquis Di Natale, looked at the huge craters in the ground in front of him. He then looked at Marrow City, which was barely visible in the distance. He angrily threw his sword to the ground. After leading the reinforcements here, he had already launched 4 attacks on Marrow City. However, each time they moved out, they would be hit by the powerful magic cannons that covered the sky from Marrow City. After paying a large price, they still couldn't break through this tight blockade and reach Marrow City. During this entire battle, not to mention fighting the enemy, they didn't even see the enemy's shadow. As for reaching the goal of taking back Marrow City as soon as possible, that was simply a fantasy. Sir, it seems like it's not a good idea to attack from this direction. According to the reports, the new flyer only sent out 5,000 guards this time. We should make use of our superior numbers and split up to attack Marrow City. As long as we charge into Marrow City, the powerful military magic machines of the new flyer guards won't be of any use, the staff officer suggested to Di Natale Marquis. Di Natale Marquis pondered for a moment and nodded in agreement. After that, he summoned the other commanders of the reinforcements and had a meeting to discuss the battle plan. After that, the 50,000 reinforcements were divided into 4 groups. One of the groups, 20,000 men, would remain and continue to be led by Di Natale Marquis. They would continue to exert pressure on Marrow City in the north of the city. The other 3 groups split into 3 groups, circling around Meluo City and attacking from 3 different directions. With the strength of the new Flyers guards, it would be very difficult for them to deal with attacks from 4 directions. As long as the reinforcements could enter Marrow City, it would be difficult for the new Flyer guards to fully utilize their advantage in military magic machines, allowing the reinforcements to fully utilize their advantage in numbers. However, the plan was beautiful, but reality was cruel. Marquis Di Natale was still leading the remaining 20,000 reinforcements to stay where they were, waiting for the other 3 reinforcements to send the signal to attack at the same time. Suddenly, a dark cloud flew over from the southwest direction, almost covering the entire sky. Di Natale Marquis and the other leaders of the reinforcements looked up and their expressions all changed. The dark cloud in the sky was clearly formed by magic airships. To be able to form such a large shadow in the sky, with a rough look, there were at least 50 of them. Di Natale Marquis didn't have time to think about where these magic airships came from. He immediately ordered the magicians of the army to attack. Everyone knew that the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's magic airships could keep flying in the air, so they could attack them from above. The only ones who could threaten the magic airships were the magicians who could also fly. But when the magicians of the army were halfway up, they saw several dazzling beams of light coming from the magic airships. These beams of light were incomparably thick and fast. The magicians who were flying up couldn't dodge them at all and could only take them head-on. However, in front of everyone's eyes, the magic shields that these advanced mages had put up vanished like bubbles under the illumination of the light beam. Seeing the magicians in the sky fall down like kites with their strings cut, Di Natale Marquis' heart sunk bit by bit. Even the magicians couldn't do a thing to the magic airships. Wouldn't they just be beaten? However, what Di Natale Marquis didn't expect was that after the magic airships shot down the magicians and flew above the reinforcements, they didn't move at all. They just silently floated in the air like they were watching a play. Di Natale Marquis and the other generals of the reinforcements were a bit confused. With the absolute advantage of the magic airships in the air, if they wanted to take care of them, it wouldn't take any effort at all. But now that the magic airships were acting like this, what did they want to do? Di Natale Marquis took a pair of binoculars and carefully looked it over. After confirming that the magic airships above them did indeed come from the new flyer, he felt even more confused. After thinking for a bit, he turned to look at Marrow City in the distance and suddenly understood something. After shoving the binoculars into the arms of his adjutant, Marquis Di Natale mounted his beloved warhorse and gestured for his subordinates not to follow him. He then slowly rode his horse toward Marrow City in the distance. As expected, seeing that he was riding alone, the Marrow City side didn't fire any magic cannons, allowing him to quickly arrive at Marrow City. "Is there the leader of the new flyer guards up there? Can you come down to talk?" Di Natale Marquis looked up at the tall walls of Marrow City as he shouted. After a while, 3 figures jumped down from the walls and landed in front of Di Natale Marquis. The 2 silhouettes landed gracefully, as if they were leaves drifting down without a sound. The other figure fell like a giant rock, creating a large ping sound that was very shocking. Marquis Di Natale calmed himself down and dismounted from his horse. His gaze swept across the faces of the 3 figures, and he realized that the 2 graceful figures were 2 male elves, while the one with the frightening aura was a brawny human. "Let me introduce myself. I am Dwayne Di Natale Marquis, the commander of the reinforcements. May I ask which one of you is the person in charge of the new flyer?" Di Natale Marquis asked. "Oh, I never thought that Sir Marquis would personally come. It really is a surprise." That large human man laughed before pointing at himself. "I am the person in charge here, as well as the captain of the new flyer guards, Hart." "Captain Hart, is it?" Di Natale Marquis looked at the 2 male elves who were also wearing the uniform of the new flyer guards and tactfully didn't ask. After pausing, he continued, "I want to ask, what is the goal of your operation this time?" "Sir Marquis, your question is a bit strange. Isn't what we're doing very obvious? We're invading your Canla Empire. Look, the Marrow City behind us is the first city we're attacking. We'll be attacking one city after another before finally attacking your capital, Wimbledon City." "You're lying." Di Natale Marquis looked at Captain Hart with a sunken look before turning to point at the several dozen magic airships in the sky. "If this is your goal, why aren't those fellows moving? You clearly don't have any intention of wiping us out." Captain Hart gave a shrug. "No, you're mistaken. Sir Marquis, we just don't want to waste our precious ammunition on opponents that aren't worth mentioning. Of course, if Sir Marquis is stupid enough, we don't mind teaching you and your subordinates a deep lesson." Marquis Di Natale took in a deep breath. It took him a lot of effort to suppress the raging flames of fury that were rising in his heart. He had personally led an army of 50,000 elites, but they weren't even worth mentioning in the eyes of these fellows? This was simply the greatest insult to him. However, he had no choice but to admit this fact. Whether it was the repeated setbacks when they attacked Beautiful City or the appearance of the magic airships that he couldn't do anything about, it all showed that even if the army he led had a large advantage in terms of numbers, they couldn't resist at all in a real battle. It was like Captain Hart said, if they really wanted to, just with the 50 magic airships in the sky, they wouldn't be able to resist at all. In the end, they might not even be able to escape. The other side didn't do this because they had another goal. Or perhaps it was like Captain Hart's words had implied, that their reinforcements were just opponents that weren't worth mentioning. Then who was their real opponent? "Sir Marquis, you can go back. We aren't interested in wiping you out, so if you want to retreat or stay outside Marrow City to watch the play, it's up to you. But I must warn you, don't try to approach Marrow City. Otherwise, I won't mind teaching you another lesson." Captain Hart suddenly said with a cold face. Marquis Di Natale was stunned. Then, He took a deep breath and looked at Captain Hart with a gloomy face. I don't know what you want to do, but I'm warning you, you are playing with fire. Playing with fire? Captain Hart laughed. Perhaps you're right. But playing with fire doesn't always lead to self-destruction, right? After saying this, Captain Hart gestured for them to go ahead. Di Natale Marquis took a deep look at him before giving a snort. He turned to get on his horse and quickly left. Chapter 1099. More than 300 kilometers northeast of Mero City, in Babel, where the governor's office of the southwest province was located, the atmosphere was much more tense than usual. 5 days ago, the news of the fall of Mero City reached Babel. At first, the people didn't pay much attention to it. They thought that this bold enemy would be easily crushed by the Empire's army. However, just yesterday another shocking news came back. The 50,000 troops sent by the governor's office to Mero City had all fallen in Mero City. Only the commander of the Yuan army, Di Natale Marquis, managed to escape alone. This news immediately caused the people of Babel to fall into a panic. The fall of Mero City could be attributed to the Empire's soldiers underestimating the enemy. However, the 50,000 reinforcements sent by the governor's office were the elite troops of the southwest province. Now, all of them had fallen in Mero City. These enemies were powerful to this extent? No, Your Grace. The enemy this time is much stronger than you think. Di Natale Marquis looked at the governor of the southwest province, Duke Charles, and added with a serious expression, Don't say that the 50,000 reinforcements I lead are no match for them. I believe that even if all the troops of the southwest province were to go all out, they still wouldn't be able to do anything to them. Duke Charles stared at Di Natale Marquis for a long time with a sullen expression. He couldn't help but have a trace of surprise in his eyes. If he hadn't known Di Natale Marquis for so many years and understood his character very well, he definitely wouldn't have believed these words. He knew that Di Natale wasn't the kind of person who would talk nonsense and deliberately exaggerate to cover up his failure. What a joke! Forget about the 30,000 troops stationed in Mero City being wiped out. Now, even the 50,000 elite troops he sent were defeated and returned. Oh no, they didn't even return. According to Marquis Di Natale's report, those damn Frestec Chamber of Commerce guards didn't put their 50,000 people in their eyes at all. They even treated attacking them as a waste of ammunition. Di Natale Marquis didn't have the slightest intention of refuting this statement. He even said in front of Duke Charles that even if all the troops of the southwest province were to go all out, they still wouldn't be able to do anything to them. According to what you said, should I just surrender to those new flyer guys? Thinking of this, Duke Charles couldn't help but ask coldly with a hint of mockery. How could Marquis Di Natale not hear the meaning in Duke Charles's words? However, he could only give a helpless bitter laugh before continuing. If the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's goal is to defeat all the resistance in our southwest province, I believe that they can do this. But their goal doesn't seem to be here. Duke Charles frowned deeply. Then what do you think their purpose is? At the very least, they captured Meluo City, right? Your Grace, Your Grace, Your Grace, Your Grace, Your Grace, Your Grace, Your Grace. They're just... Enough! Duke Charles slammed the table angrily and interrupted Di Natale Marquis' words. I've heard enough of your flattery of the enemy. Now that the enemy has taken over Mero City, do you still want me to stay here and do nothing while they do whatever they want? Your Grace, the truth is that we don't have the ability to resist them. Di Natale Marquis spread his hands helplessly. I think we have to admit that the new flyer has now mastered many powerful military magic machines that we can't even hope to reach. Our combat strength is not on the same level at all. If we insist on fighting them, we'll only be sending ourselves to our death. So we're just going to wait here for them to take over Mero City, then take over the other cities in our southwest province one by one. Finally, they'll swallow Marrow City, swallow the entire southwest province, and finally swallow the entire empire? Duke Charles said coldly. Of course not, I just feel that, Your Grace, we should report the specific situation here to the military and let the big shots in the military make a decision. You don't need to worry about this. I have already reported the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's invasion. I believe that in just a few days, the army headquarters will react. After saying this, Duke Charles suddenly cursed in a low voice in an angry voice. If it wasn't for those damn fellows hindering us, we would have built a magic communication network with Wimbledon with the help of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce. We wouldn't need to wait several days for a call like this. Marquis de Natali opened his mouth, but he decided to give up on reminding Duke Charles. Among the people stopping the Frestec Chamber of Commerce from building the magic communication network, Duke Charles was one of them. Your Grace, we're now… Duke Charles glanced at him and snorted coldly. Of course we can't just sit here and wait for news from the military and ignore Marrow City. De Natali, 3 days later, pick 10,000 people from the 5th Legion and go to Marrow City to provide support. De Natali Marquis was stunned. 5th Legion? 10,000 people? De Natali Marquis almost thought that Duke Charles was joking. The so-called 5th Legion was actually the last legion in the Southwest Province's regular army. Although it was considered a regular army legion, in fact, the main task of this legion was to be responsible for logistics, engineering, and other miscellaneous work. They had no combat experience at all, and even their weapons and equipment were not complete. They were just miscellaneous soldiers with almost no combat ability. Not to mention 10,000 people, even if the entire 5th Legion sent 40,000 people to Marrow City, the situation would only be worse than the 50,000 reinforcements. What? Don't you understand? Duke Charles narrowed his eyes and asked De Natali Marquis. Do you want me to repeat it again? De Natali Marquis opened his mouth and was about to ask Duke Charles why he sent 10,000 people from the 5th Legion as reinforcements. However, he suddenly caught a glimpse of the strange expression on Duke Charles's face. His heart suddenly lit up and he understood. Yes, Your Grace, I understand. However, you only gave us 3 days. Isn't that a little too rushed? I think it will take at least 5 days. No, it will take at least a week to prepare. After all, the enemy is very powerful. If we don't prepare properly, we won't have much chance of winning. Duke Charles showed a satisfied smile and shook his head gently. He replied, no need. The people of Marrow City can't wait that long. The big shots in the military can't wait that long either. 3 days is enough. I believe the military will respond in 3 days. De Natali Marquis understood what Duke Charles meant. He immediately nodded and agreed. ####. A week later, when De Natali Marquis led 10,000 soldiers of the 5th Legion, who could not even maintain a complete marching formation, to a place 5 kilometers away from Marrow City, they met up with the first batch of 50,000 reinforcements who had stayed here for 10 days. The news immediately spread to Marrow City. Hey, it seems that the nobles of the Canla Empire are not fools. They know what they should do. Captain Hart only glanced at the intelligence report. He immediately shifted his attention away from it. Is there any movement in other areas? For example, the military of the Canla Empire hasn't responded? Hey, just 3 days ago, the idiots of the Kandra Empire's army headquarters were still arguing. I don't believe that they can come to a conclusion in just 3 days. The Vice-Captain Nunes on the side said with a look of disdain. That's why it's not all good for a country to be too big. Look at it now. It's so difficult to make a decision. Unfortunately, I really hope they can be more daring and come up with a countermeasure as soon as possible. Otherwise, if I continue to stay here, my body will rust. Captain Hart sighed. Isn't that so? If it's not you, I've been bored to death these days too. Newton also complained. Over the past few days since they had taken Meow City, perhaps it was because the city lord Count Dempus had fallen into their control, but no one in Meow City dared to resist. So the citizens of the city were very obedient and there were no signs of unrest at all. The Frestec Chamber of Commerce guards who had already prepared for this didn't even need to prepare a plan. Of course, according to the intelligence report, the Dempus family had never treated the citizens of the territory they ruled well. There had even been a small riot last year. As a result, more than 1,000 citizens were injured or killed. In this situation, perhaps the citizens of the Canla Empire would think that Count Dempus falling into the hands of the new flyer was a good thing. Captain Hart even believed that if they didn't consider the goal of this operation and just focused on occupying the city, as long as they drove away the tens of thousands of Canla Empire soldiers outside, they wouldn't need to spend that much effort to truly take Marrow City. After all, when it came to buying people's hearts, the new flyer had a unique advantage that other powers couldn't compare to. That was that the new flyer could easily lead the economic development of an area, clearly improving the living conditions of most people and letting them live better lives. These citizens of the Canla Empire didn't have any loyalty to their lord, so their concept of the Canla Empire was even weaker. If there was someone who could let them live better lives, naturally it would be easy to obtain their loyalty. This was something that the new flyer had done in Banta City and had done many times in the Principality of Constantine. Now that the new flyer's employees were all very loyal to the company, they were willing to follow the new flyer to make their lives better and better. Who wouldn't know how to choose when compared to staying under the Count's rule and not being able to fill their stomachs? Of course, before considering these problems, they had to take care of the biggest obstacle first, which was the main goal of Sir Chairman personally arranging this operation. Perhaps it was because he sensed the thoughts in Captain Hart's heart. A guard in charge of communication suddenly ran over and loudly reported to Captain Hart. Reporting to the captain, there are large amounts of high-energy reactions coming from the northeast. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.